You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, an Indiana-based public relations enterprise, and federally certified veteran-owned small business. I'm your host, Robert Bain, along with our producer, Chris Spangle. Our podcast is featured on the All Indiana Podcast Network in partnership with Wish TV. You may find Leaders and Legends at allindianapodcastnetwork.com. Thinking of starting a podcast or need to host a public meeting? Let Leaders and Legends, LLC, be your partner as you look for new ways to communicate your message. Please contact us at chris@leadersandlegends.net. As always, all our podcast interviews are dedicated to the legacy and generosity of P.E. McAllister. Today, we go back to the future. Our very first guest in early 2019 was Mayor Greg Ballard. And at that time, I just said, we'd love to have you back on one day when you have something that you think's worthy to talk about. So 6 years later, we have him on. Mayor Greg Ballard is promoting his book, Urban Republican Mayor, My Story. And he's going to spend some time with us today. And, you know, people always ask me who my favorite guest is. And I always say Greg Ballard. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, my former boss.
Thank you for having me. I remember that first podcast. You may not remember, you had me on a few years later talking about the Super Bowl.
Super Bowl, that's right.
Mark Miles and Mel Raines.
Mel Raines.
And what we did. And Mel Raines is doing just fine right now.
Miles isn't overturning the couch for pennies either.
No, he's not. But I actually just texted Mel a couple of days ago. I did it when the Pacers were having their run, and then when the Fever upset the Aces the other night, I said, geez, this is really good. You got a really good first few months in that job going on right now.
We're going to get into so much when it comes to your book, but I want to just stay on that theme for a second. You know, we look at the sort of the founding fathers, greatest generation of Indianapolis leaders. Some are still with us, but some have passed. P.E. McAllister, Jim Morris, the list, you know, we could sit here and name the list all day long. Bill Stinson, who I know you met in grade school all the way through Cathedral. Rest in peace. But there's a new generation coming up. Mel and I are about the same age. You got Paul Okeson, the whole group of us who are kind of in their 45 to 55, 60 range. How important is it for a city to keep seeding next generation leaders?
Critical to the future of cities, and Indianapolis does this probably better than other people. There's so many cohorts out there that get together, like the Lacey Leadership Group, Mitch Daniels Leadership Foundation, and other groups. There's probably two or three more that take mid-professionals who are talented and motivated and want to help their city and help their community more than they are doing at the moment, and want to be, frankly, connected. They want to learn, but they also want to be connected so that they can help. And I think Indianapolis does that really, really well. It's probably an underrated aspect of our city. And I'm so happy that it's there. I help with Mitch Daniels Leadership Foundation and talk to some of their fellows quite a bit and do what I can in that regard. And people still call me up to talk about things, which is nice. But part of it also goes back to what I say what we did in office also, which is I think we created a new generation of leadership, because look at where our people are right now that were in our administration, and they're really kind of killing it. And presidents of several companies. I got 4 in IU in very prominent positions. A Hoosier Lottery director, a civil rights director, the previous one. And there's so many that's going on. It's kind of amazing. But these groups that we're talking about have helped groom so many people, hundreds and hundreds of young professionals that are now going to get back to the city and the state in bigger ways.
An unexpected opportunity for all of us to work in an Indianapolis mayor's office. I don't want to speak for anyone else, but as someone who was certainly very political in the much more so than now, but in the early parts of my career, I never, ever thought I would work for a Republican mayor of Indianapolis. Do you get the sense that there's a whole nother generation out there, younger than, let's say, me, I'm 57, who are ready to step up and lead Indianapolis?
Yes. Other than the fact that so many of these young professionals are looking to do more, I almost feel turned off at the moment to get into the political cycle, which I think is not good at all. I tell people all the time, especially people that I really admire, have a great sense of integrity, have a great sense of public service, you should run for office, and they have no interest in doing so. I tell them, I say that repeatedly, actually, but they won't do it. And as I say also, that behind every office holder, there are a large number of talented, highly skilled, well-meaning people on both sides of the aisle.
Sure.
On both sides of the aisle that are helping the office holder get to where they want to go. After I won in 2007, I believe it was the second Saturday, people like Bob Grant and Joe Loftus and Melissa Prophet asked me to meet and start the transition team. There's a whole story. It's in the book. There's a whole story about this. So we met at Barnes and Thornburg on a Saturday morning. We're not quite sure what we're going to do yet, but right there in that conference room at Barnes and Thornburg downtown were 200 of the highest skilled people in central Indiana. Lawyers, CEOs, vice presidents, former office holders, and everything. There had to be 200 of them, and I might have known 4 or 5. And yet here they were saying to me, we want to help you get off on the right foot and send the city in the right direction.
All I remember about that morning does this guy know what he's gotten into? Does he really understand how this city works? There was a lot of angst about the fact that you were not of the class, the political class, for sure. The previous mayors had been, all of them, one way or the other. Did you find that to be a challenge you embraced, or kind of like, guys, I did spend 23 years in the Marine Corps and I am from here? Was it somewhat insulting? Because it was there, because I don't know how much Chris Spangle was behind the Accidental Mayor blog, but I'm sure it was a highlight of his career. That was out there, that you just Forrest Gumped your way into the mayor's office.
It was out there, but I was old enough and I would suggest savvy enough to realize it was there. Both things that you said are kind of true. I knew that feeling was there, but also I wasn't a young pup either. I was in my 50s. I spent 23 years in the Marine Corps. I had been to war. There's a lot that I did know, particularly when it comes to putting teams together and getting things done, the leadership aspect of it, if you will. But I also knew that I didn't know everything around me. I got that. I did not have all the connections. Like I say, if there were 200 people there and I knew 4 or 5, that should tell you something. But these are the people who were connected. These are the people who knew things. These are the people who wanted to help. And I embraced that. I did not say, where were you guys? I didn't, as I like to say, I forgave everybody after that election.
After the amnesty ball.
Yeah. Well, I just, if you want to help. Now, there are other people, this, who wanted me to go kiss their ring to get involved.
The hell with that.
And I did not do that. I'm not built that way, and I did not do that. But if you wanted to help in the city, if you wanted to be a part of it, if you wanted just to help us get direction, we welcome that all over. And the transition plan that came together was binders and binders full of stuff about the history of this department or the history of that department. Here's where it's running well. Here's where maybe we could change some things. And it was almost a foot long of binders of really in-depth stuff that these people gave me and did for me and the team. And so we felt like we were jumping off pretty good. We didn't have a tremendous amount of transition with the previous administration, but we did have a lot of knowledge had going into it. And I thought that was critical for us. So I felt pretty good about it. But I also knew personally I had to get better pretty quickly. I knew I was the mayor of a major city in the United States. I wasn't a political animal at all, but I had been around the block a couple times in other areas.
We're going to get to your youth and your service and all kinds of things, but I want to stay with your administration for just a second. Would you looking back, would you say, let me ask it a different way because I don't want to put words in your mouth. How would you characterize your first year in office? Because to me, you only got better and better after that. But the first year was, is it fair to say, rough?
Rough might be a little much. I would say it was careful. It was a learning experience, but I knew it. So I wasn't out there. I knew instinctively, nobody told me this. I knew that I could not go out and make big pronouncements about the city, and I knew I couldn't do that because I didn't have the credibility with the citizenry yet or the political class within Indianapolis to do that sort of thing. So I didn't. I took it to learn. There were some things I had to get better at, and I like to think that I did. I was fortunate enough that the result of that Saturday at Barnes and Thornburg resulted in a team that was kind of unbelievable. And it was so talented, and people gave up great jobs to come work for the administration. I was so blessed. And I did not know one of them before the transition. Did not know one of them. And
of the people who started with you in your first year in significant positions within the city's administration, did you know any of them?
No.
Before the election?
Only John Cochran, who was helping me. He was
Sure.
Campaign manager.
Yeah.
Other than John Cochran, no. I mean, the whole election team was me, John Cochran, and Kurt Fullbeck, what I call 2.5 men, because Kurt was a full-time student and kind of a part-time helper with the campaign, and then me and John Cochran. That was it. The party largely got involved through Kyle Walker, and I will never ever forget Kyle Walker and what he did. He stuck with me when, to be fair, at the party at the time was not expecting me to win. It was not.
It wasn't just the party.
So there wasn't a tremendous amount of investment from the political operation, if you will, of the party. But Kyle always stuck with me. He was the executive director of the party. He was there all the time, helping me out and giving me guidance. So I'll never ever forget that. But I just didn't know anybody. Just the funny thing, I'm now the mayor of a major city. I've got to put a transition team together, and it was amazing. Let me tell you the short story. This is 2 days after the election. You don't, as I find out, you don't sleep the night of the election when you win. You sleep the second night.
I started with you Thursday after the election.
Yeah, and you were. You brought order to chaos. You and Jennifer Pierce, brought order to the chaos at that point in time, because I got national news wanting to talk to me.
President of the United States calling you?
President of the United States. I got the governor of Indiana. I got news operations out of D.C. or New York wanting to talk to me. It was kind of something going on. And I mean, I was kind of okay with it to a point, but I needed a lot of help, which is where you came in. But also that I believe it was the second day. It had to be that Thursday. Me and John Cochran are in the office along with Joe Loftus. Now, and I know that Joe Loftus has the driest wit in the world. Hilarious, but you'd never know it because he never changes his facial expression.
It's positively arid.
Yes. So I'm sitting at my desk in the Marion County headquarters. John Cochran is sitting across from me, and one of his legs is just bouncing up and down, it's so nervous, and you can just see it. And it's just going up and down. Joe Loftus is sitting next to John Cochran. So I'm at a desk. In front of me are John Cochran and Joe Loftus. And I said, John, we just won this election. Surely we can figure out how to do the transition team. And John's going, and so all this, and John's a great guy too. I mean, you just have to understand John, what a wonderful guy. But after about 5 minutes of that, Joe Loftus stopped us and said, if I may, and he opens up his briefcase and he has the entire transition plan printed out ready to go. 2 days after
And
the
Joe
election.
Loftus had been
Joe Loftus
deputy
was
mayor.
the deputy mayor for Steve Goldsmith. I had talked to him for maybe an hour and a half, sometime in June, a few months before. I did talk to him kind of along the way just to say hi and things like that. But he's also the guy that I said 4 days before the election. 4 days before the election, I said to Joe, Joe, you're going to be the first phone call I make after the election. And he said, I'd be honored to take that call. So 4 days before the election, I was pretty confident I was going to win, even though I had no polling data whatsoever. It was just a feeling that I had the last 2 weeks of the election that it was going my way.
You're listening to the Leaders and Legends podcast. Our guest today is former Mayor Greg Ballard. We're discussing his book, Urban Republican Mayor, My Story. You born on the east side?
The near northeast side on a street called Randolph Street. I stayed there, I don't know how long, less than a year, maybe, until we moved out to 3131 Arthington Boulevard until I was 12 years old, northeast side, 30th and Emerson area.
Sure.
Then when I was 12, my family moved out by Arlington High School, near 46th and Arlington.
Where'd you go for grade school?
I went to St. Francis de Sales, 1 through 6, which is now Martin University. Then 7th and 8th, I went to St. Andrews, which is on 38th Street, no longer there also. High school was Cathedral High School back when it was an all-male Catholic high school downtown at 14th and Meridian, which is now the Catholic Center.
You graduated in 72?
72 from high school.
Catholicism. You never, in nothing that I've ever really seen you read or discuss, and I don't remember it ever being requested to be a part of your speech template. Catholicism. You went to Catholic school for 12 years, and this is 60s and early 70s. So how much did it make a difference to you?
I think it made a lot of difference on the education level. I'm not sure on the religious level. It probably did, but I'm never, probably because it's hard to remember really right now because I so much believe in the separation of church and state. That's what I thought about the last 20 years. But when I was younger, it was just part of what you did. You went to mass when you're supposed to go to mass. I was a server. I did a lot of work with the priests and that sort of thing, but I was just going through the motions, to be frank with you. And my dad my dad was a fast pitch softball player, really good.
Worked at Lilly, as I recall.
Worked at Lilly on the lower end. Lilly stabilized us. It didn't make us rich, but it stabilized our family from what was going on previously. So I'll never, ever say a bad word about Lilly.
And going to private school in the 60s and 70s, that wasn't as nearly as popular or as affordable with vouchers as it is now. So if you were middle class and could afford that tuition.
Well, we were probably lower middle class. My dad worked other jobs to send us to school. He was a bartender and things like that and trying to do that. But when I look at the tuition right now, it's kind of funny how much it was then compared to what it is now. But
I remember my parents arguing over $400 in Cathedral annual tuition in the 70s.
Something like that. That's right. But I think it was, but my dad's fast pitch softball friends told him to send his kids to Catholic schools. And that's what he did. He wasn't Catholic. I don't think my mom was Catholic either. But his friends told him to send your kids to Catholic schools. And he did that.
Why IU?
Because everybody else went to IU. I had 3 older brothers. We all went to IU. For some reason, I don't know why this was. I got a full ride to Cathedral, academic ride. I tested third on the test that they used to do.
Sure.
I tested third in the city, which gave me a full ride to Cathedral. Again, $250 when I started, $450 when I ended. So it sounds like nothing now, but back then that was a fair amount of money.
Because when you were ending, my brothers were starting,
right.
And that's how I can remember the argument.
So that said, I wasn't a bad kid. I was actually a really good kid, but I was unmotivated and unstructured. The chapter in my childhood in the book is called Unstructured because I just didn't know. Everything was so easy to me. It was so easy. When I got to IU, nobody was actually watching me if I went to class. So I didn't lots of the time. I was just unstructured. I wasn't doing horrible things. I just wasn't really motivated to go in any particular direction. So it took me a little longer to get through IU, even though I'm one of those guys. I'm in the National Marathon.
6 years
and a summer.
I remember reading your bio and I went, Cathedral 72, IU 78. There's something going on there. So I didn't know if you had toured with Strawberry Alarm Clock or what you had done.
Well, it was unmotivated. Again, I wasn't getting in trouble. I wasn't doing anything terrible. Nothing like that was going on. But I just, I liked Bloomington. I started going part-time. My dad kind of stopped supporting me down there, as he should have. And I would, work in a sporting goods store, pay tuition for a few classes and go on. And so that's just what happened at the end until I think I finally figured out I need to get on with my life eventually. And
you went from unstructured to structured, and we're going to talk about that. But, I've been lucky enough to have, when we post this, will probably be my 340th podcast. So we've had dozens of IU grads. They would all go back tomorrow and start all over if they could just go back to IU. Is that how you feel about it?
Yes, absolutely.
And you were there for the undefeated season.
Those were great teams. And everybody who was there during that time would tell you that the 75 team was better than the 76 team because they had Steve Green and John Laskowski. But the talent at IU in the faculty was crazy. And I took no advantage of it whatsoever.
Econ major, as I recall.
Eventually went down there to be a
doctor.
You
got there?
Went down there to be a doctor, had that wind up. When you don't go to chemistry class, it's really tough to be a doctor. But that's just where I was. And all this amazing talent at IU that I just did not take advantage of. And they wanted to help, but I just didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to ask for help. I didn't know anything. It was, like I say, I wasn't a bad kid. I just didn't know what to do. Didn't know where I was going. Didn't know what the path was. I didn't know anything about anything.
And you sent both of your kids, marvelous kids, Greg Jr., being probably the nicest guy I've ever met, and Erica, who has a heart as big as this city. You sent them both to Brebeuf.
I did.
And they went to IU. So how did you impart your unstructured theory and advice on your kids? How much difference did it make when it was their turn?
My kids had a much more structured upbringing than I did, and I made sure of that. Now, again, I had great parents, don't get me wrong, but they just didn't know, right? They just didn't know, especially to do with somebody like me. So my kids had a much more structured life. I sent them to Brebeuf. We were coming back from Germany, retired out of Germany from the Marine Corps, sent them to Brebeuf purposely, had them take the exam over in Germany. Brebeuf sent the exams over to Germany, and my kid took it as a 7th grader. No problems. But when they got in there, I made sure they were in the right classes and did the right things. And so I was kind of keeping an eye on them, and I knew they were in pretty good hands at Brebeuf. And when I sent them to IU, I really kind of just told them 2 things. One of them was, if you ever want to go to grad school, you got to keep it above a 3.5. That's what I told them, and they both did. Something I didn't do.
Go to grad school, meaning to get in, or for you to pay for it to get in?
If you ever want to go to grad school, you're going to need a 3.5, so you better keep that up. And they did. Both of them did that. So
you mentioned unstructured childhood being different than your children's, who had a more structured childhood. Where would you be? Where would your children be without Winnie Ballard?
Well, I was. That's a great question, because Winnie's naturalized American citizen, does not understand a lot of the nuance of America, and particularly the humor. So she still can't get a joke. I mean, she's 70 years old, still can't get a joke sometimes. It's pretty funny to watch. But Winnie raised those children. I was in the Marine Corps during that time. I was deployed lots of times. I was at war. And so Winnie was the rock of all of it. And so it's kind of hard to imagine how we did that. I knew the education system better, even though they were going through a lot of DOD schools, Department of Defense schools. and the school system in America. So, for instance, when we moved to St. Louis, when I took over the commanding officer of a recruiting station, I had 2/3 of Illinois, eastern third of Missouri, and I checked the school system out. And I moved into by far the best school system in the St. Louis area. So I was able to do that. But Winnie was the rock. It's hard to imagine while I was doing all this, she was actually making sure the kids were raised right the right way, right, and getting where they needed to be, and showing the heart that she has and the way that she does all those things. So the kids to this day still talk to her more than me, and it kind of breaks my heart sometimes. But it's not like I talked to both my kids 2 days ago. So, but Erica calls her mom once a day at a minimum, maybe twice a day from Denver, FaceTimes with the grandkids. and Greg does that maybe 2 to 3 times a week with my mom. Well, I mean, with my wife. So it's, that tells you a lot, I think. So
would you have run for mayor without Mrs. Ballard's either explicit or implicit approval?
That's a great question. Maybe she didn't know the political system in America. Frankly, she was busy raising kids, and she grew up in the Philippines. And she didn't move over till she was like 20 to America, and so she didn't really know the system. She was busy working, and then when we got married, we had kids pretty soon, and so she was just raising the kids. Didn't really know it. She told me all the time that she didn't actually understand what was going on until primary night, when I had those 4 TV cameras in my face and I going over my well-rehearsed 2-minute talk. And then she said, "Oh my God, he's really doing this." So she didn't know too much about it, but she was more like, if this is what you want to do, go ahead and do it. That's who she is. And she'll support me. If it was something really, really that she was against, she'd tell me that too. But this was one of those things. If you think this is the right thing to do, then I'll be there with you. And obviously she was.
1978, you graduate from Indiana University. Did you join the Marine Corps that same year?
I did.
And why? Because let's put it in historical perspective. Late 70s, 3-4 years after the fall of Saigon in 75, military career wasn't really on a lot of people's radar, especially the Marine Corps, I would say. If you're going to choose one, that wouldn't be the one you choose. My brother, Jimmy, who was Cathedral 77, joined the military. Joined the Army at the same time. And I remember the discussions like, why do you want to do that? It was a different time, but yet you joined.
I did. And I had gone through the paperwork and all the security clearances and everything else 2 years prior, because I thought I was going to go in another way. Now, you have to understand why I chose the Marines, because I went into the recruiting office in Bloomington, which did not do officers at all. And in fact, I would tell you, I was so naive. I wasn't sure quite the delineation between officers and enlisted. I didn't know much of anything. I'm a non-military guy completely. And I went in to talk to the Army, Navy, and Air Force particularly. And I told my friends, I'm never going to talk to the Marine Corps. Inside that building in Bloomington, the Army, Navy, and Air Force recruiters were all busy, and the Marine recruiter was lurking in the hallway. And he was a former drill instructor. And at this time, I'm like 5'10", 120 pounds. Right? Not a big kid. I mean, I went to high school. I was 5'3" and 80 pounds. I mean, you got to understand where this all came from. So,
suffering from alcohol poisoning, were you down at Indiana University?
No. Again, I didn't. I was a good kid. I just wasn't doing what I should have been doing. But I wasn't drinking heavily. I wasn't doing any of that stuff. So I go into this thing, and he's in the hallway, and I'm kind of like trying to avoid him. And he comes up to me, and he said, old drill instructor, Gunny Paxton. "Hey, want to talk about the Marine Corps?" And I was scared to death. Absolutely scared to death. I went in and talked to him, stayed there 2 hours talking to that guy. He says, "You got 90 hours done. Go back to school and finish up and come in as an officer." 15 years later, I'm the commanding officer of a recruiting station based out of St. Louis. None of my recruiters would have said that. None of them. But he told me that day.
That's Dave and Sarah Taylor's son.
Yeah.
Has done that.
Yeah. So that's what I did. And I tried to go to something called PLC, where you go 6 months during the summer, 6 weeks during the summer, finish up your senior year, which is problematic, but just for me anyway. And then go the final 6 weeks after the senior year. Got all that done. But I was going part-time. No one told me I couldn't go part-time. And so 2 weeks before I was going to go to that course in Quantico, the recruiter asked for my transcript. I gave it to him. I was taking 10 hours. He said, well, you can't go. I said, I've done through all this. I mean, it takes months to go with security clearances and background checks and everything done. Then I couldn't go. So when I got the 90 hours, I got the extra 30 hours done, the last 30 hours done. At the end of 78, in the summer of 78, I went up to the Indianapolis office, OSO office, officer selection office. And I went into the captain there and I said, listen, you don't know who I am, but all my background checks have been done. I just want to join now. Can you send me? And he looked at me like I was nuts. Who are you? Why am I talking to you? That sort of thing. But he checked it out. He says, all your background checks have been done. We got a slot to leave in about a month and a half. You want to go? And I went. And I actually, believe it or not, I was still so discombobulated in my own mind that the movie Breaking Away was being filmed in Bloomington at that time. And I was asked to be one of the bike riders in the scenes.
And you made it?
I decided I had to go start my life. And so I declined to be in the movie. It wasn't like I was going to be a star. It might have been in there for 3 seconds, right? But it would have been fun. But I had to decide whether to join the Marines at that time or be in the movie for like 3 seconds. And I decided to join the Marines. And believe it or not, I thought about it. Honestly, I did.
While you were at IU, did you know some of the people you eventually worked with during your time as mayor? I mean, we've had Jim Morrison and he was there, and Kittle and Ed Tracy and Randy Tobias, David Frick. You had all this with Purdue. It was Jerry Simler, Jim Doris Sr., Fred Klipsch. In other words, friendships that began decades before, perhaps, but then worked together in the city. Did you have anything like that?
Nothing like that at all. Again, I wasn't really engaged. I was kind of went to class when I wanted to until I started to get a little bit motivated if I wanted to join the Marines. But no, not really. And I see a lot of those guys now afterwards, but it wasn't like they were part of my post-Marine life back here in Indianapolis. Not really.
Other than marrying Winnie Ballard, best decision you ever made joining the service?
Yes, no question, because I went from unstructured, as I say in the book, my life was about to change forcefully and all for the better. And it did. I didn't know myself at the time. That's pretty true for almost everybody through the age of 30 anyway. But I work better with structure. I thrive in structure. I'm actually more creative with structure. Some people would say just the opposite, but I am better with the structure. So the Marines provided that structure, and that structure is very well defined. And if you work within that structure, you're going to do okay. And if you're not, then you're not going to do okay. And I wanted to work within that structure, and I did okay. I got out on my own terms 23 years later, and I think I did a pretty good job with what I had.
It's hard to overstate how uncool the military was in the late 70s. Everybody who goes through basic training or officer candidate school or whatever your initial sort of indoctrination is called, I'm going to say, if not all of us, then 90+% have a moment at the beginning where they're like, what in the hell did I do this for? Why am I not playing Pac-Man back in Irvington, riding my bike? Did you ever have that moment? You talked about looking for structure, but you're like, I wanted structure, but damn.
It was the second Thursday of my time at officer candidate school. I'm sitting on my footlocker, and I said, what the hell have I done? What am I doing here? I absolutely had that moment. No question about it. And it was, when we got down to OCS, you always think you're going to get yelled at and screamed at the movies. And Officer Candidate School, which is a screening process. It's not a training process. It's absolute screening. They don't care if you make it or not. 200 people went down, 110 made it. 55% made it. Of people who were already physically and mentally qualified, only 55% made it. And the first 3 or 4 days, we did not have the yelling and screaming. They gave us all medical exams. And so it was very quiet. We marched to the doctor, marched back, and then like that fourth morning, all hell broke loose. And everything you did was very fast paced. And even if you did something right, you got yelled at because you did it wrong. All of that played out. And that was still playing out by the second week, really by the third week too. But after that, it started to become a learning piece. And we were told, it was kind of funny, prior enlisted had gone in the classes also, and they told us right point blank, right in front of the prior enlisted guys who are now in trying to become officers, says, just so you guys all know, all you prior enlisted guys, you're really sharp, going to be really sharp these first 2 or 3 weeks. But about week 4 or 5, all these college kids that you think are terrible are going to go right by you. And that's kind of what happened. And we, all of us guys who had never had any military experience, started to pick up on this pretty quickly, and found the routine and found out what needed to be done. And it became great, actually. I think by the end of it, it was terrific.
At what point, that's my follow-up question, at what point in your Marine Corps career did you go, damn, I am glad I did this?
When I got selected to major.
Wasn't that during the Persian Gulf War?
I pinned on major in the Persian Gulf War. I was selected just before the Persian Gulf War because you can retire. Once you make major, you're allowed to go to 20 years and then you can retire. So at that point, I thought it was really good. I was having a really good career. I had a lot of fun. The first 3 years, I didn't really necessarily like my job very much, but I hung in there. Then I became an aide de camp and the whole world opened up to me. Rather than worried about, is this vehicle going to get out of the motor pool, I'm sitting in briefings with the Commandant of the Marine Corps, a whole different thing. PX Kelly. Yes, exactly.
And even in the Army, we had the Marine Corps officers up on our wall so, we could pay them proper.
We needed to have somebody to admire.
True. That's right.
So when I'm sitting in these briefings, then, I went to Okinawa for a year, which is a fine job. And, we just wonderful. Brought my wife over for the 1 year on our dime. It was great. Came back and just had a couple of really wonderful jobs back to back, and I was thriving at that point in time. But when you get selected to majors, as one of the guy, 3-star general told me, he says, this is when you realize you're really part of the team now. You're going to be a part of this forever now. And I thought that was a good statement for me, and I was able to do that. I got selected, was promoted major actually during the Gulf War over in the desert. And so that was nice too, and got selected as lieutenant colonel, and then decided to hang it up actually. But I had the main point was the recruiting tour, which everybody in the Marine Corps, every Marine Corps officer tries to avoid recruiting, every one of them. I actually sought it out because I knew it at the time. General Krulak, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, said any officers who complete recruiting duty, you get your choice of school or duty station. Whoa, that's a big deal. And I wanted the school. I was way past all that IU unstructured stuff, and I wanted to learn everything. I went to command and staff school and read 10 extra books that year, which nobody does because the reading is voluminous by itself. I got selected for the follow-on School of Advanced Warfighting, what the Army calls SAMS, School of Advanced Military Studies, where you become a Jedi Knight, what they call a Jedi Knight for planning purposes. And so I became a Jedi Knight in the Marine Corps for planning. And I was learning everything I possibly could. Like I couldn't get enough of it. 2 years of straight schooling, I couldn't get enough of it. Really opened my mind up in so many different ways. Helped me become a much better mayor because of all of that. And then I went to my last duty station over in Germany and did plans over there at the European Command. Again, really widened my world. My world was pretty wide at that point in time, but I'd been to Asia quite a few times, but I had not been to Europe. So going to Europe for my final 3 years not only helped me, but my kids, obviously, they were 11 and 12 when we went, 14 and 15 when we came back. They really widened their view too.
When you were deployed, Iraq invades Kuwait in the fall of 90. The air war starts, I think, in January of 91. When you were deployed over there during the conflict, Was it kind of half, why the hell am I here, mixed with, I'm here, but I joined the Marine Corps, that's why I'm here?
I think there was a sense of duty. We knew what was happening. We knew that Saddam Hussein was trying to affect the global economy through the monopoly on oil. We kind of got that. We understood that right up front. And being there was what we did. It was our duty to be there. I was fortunate enough to have gone to Panama during the Noriega time in '89. And so it gave me a sense of, can I handle this or not? Because some people didn't know when they went to the Gulf War. That was the first time they had anything real. This was my second time. I had just a little touch of it in '89. And I realized that actually I'm going to be okay. So when I went in '90, actually went in December of '90, and I was pretty confident I was going to be fine. Didn't know what was going to happen to me. There was headlines all said 10,000 casualties in the first 3 to 4 days. And so, the hardest day of my life easily was when I left Winnie that night in December of 1990. It was a horrible day. But when I was over there, I felt pretty comfortable actually, and that we'll just do what we do and move on. I was the operations officer for my battalion, so I was busy every day. I had plenty of things to be doing and was quite busy. When the air war started, we had already forward deployed pretty quickly, and we actually could see the air war from where we were. I mean, it was tens of miles in front of us, but we could kind of see the explosions, if you will. And then we started getting artillery fire just after that for about a 2-week period. Thank God they took out those guys who were firing at us, but it got a little tense those 2 weeks, getting bombed for 2 weeks, but made it through that. It was fine. I think the closest everything ever came to us was maybe a quarter of a mile or so, but it put us down. I mean, we were down, hunkered down for a while because they were shooting artillery. Tanks came a few weeks later, and all we had were machine guns. So we had there's a whole story, and it's in the book actually about my commanding officer who did not understand we're a logistics type battalion.
Sure.
We got machine guns as defense, and my commanding officer at the time, good dude, but he had a heart to heart with me, and he talked to me quite a bit. He says, we can't move south. We can't move south. We can't do that. I said, Colonel, you're going to be ordered to do that. And it's not just you. He was worried about his legacy,
sure,
believe it or not, of moving south and away from the tanks and the artillery that looked like was coming our way. Kofji, I don't know if you remember that term or not, the little city right in front of us, 15, 20 miles in front of us. Kofji, there was a battle going on, and that was a main thrust, we found out later on. That was heading our way, and he did not want to go south. And I said, I knew he was going to be ordered to go south because it's not just him. There's like maybe 500-600 Marines where we were, none of them with heavy weapons. We were because no one thought they would come to us. We were actually in front of all our heavy stuff, which is what you would really call logistics risk, right? We are the people in front of us. So we're north of all our heavy stuff. And when the heavy stuff started coming toward us, I knew they were going to make us go south. That's just the responsible thing to do because all we had were machine guns. And machine guns can't take down tanks or fired artillery. So I said, Colonel, they're going to make you move. But he was really worried about his legacy. And I understood that. It was,
did you move?
We did move. Well, we did move because we stayed where we were because we found out where the artillery was coming from. And somebody took the artillery out at that point in time. And then when the Kofji came and the tanks were started coming down from the north through a city called Kofji, air took them out. So we stayed. We actually stayed where we were.
You did a news conference once as mayor. It was involving public safety. And I'll think of the officer here in a second. But he was being excoriated because I believe he was off duty, but he heard that his friends were involved in something. And I want to say Jerry Pyland. And you did, and he, as he should have, in my view, went there, helped his buddies, but he choked someone, and it was kind of a big deal for a while. and you defended him rightly and with real vigor. And I remember I wrote your remarks for that, but you included something that I didn't have in there, and it's always stuck with me, and it is, quote, "I've been a leader of men all my life." I don't think you ever got enough credit for that. Did that bother you?
No, not really. I realized I was in a different arena a little bit, but I would also contend that people appreciated the fact that I was a Marine for 23 years, that I'd been to war. I think people appreciated that fact and understood that about me. I actually don't remember that. I remember the incident you're talking about. I don't remember me saying been a leader all my life, a man all my life. So those things are tough sometimes, as you well know. Even more so today, actually, there are sides taken, and usually there's a middle ground in there. That's really the truth. And I think people were forgetting that there was a middle ground in that particular situation, and plus the fact that there is a very definitive method of increasing force within the police department, and people have to respect that. That's how they're trained, and if they react that way, then what are you going to do? I mean, that's how they're trained, and that's what you have to follow.
I've said many times that if you had been in the Air Force for 23 years and not the Marine Corps, your messaging, your push in 2007 to shake up the world wouldn't have been received the same, especially public safety is job one, considering you had absolutely no public safety experience. Do you agree with that? We've tussled about that during the last 18 years, but I really think that, look, I was in the Army for 3 years. I can make fun of Marine Corps
with the best of them,
as enthusiastically as the best of them. But they clearly have one of the best brands in the world. When you walked into a room and people are like, okay, we got to figure this dude out. Is he even worthy? I spent 23 years in the Marine Corps. You think you had them at that point, or pretty damn close?
I think it helped quite a bit. I'm not going to diss the Air Force like you just did.
Stuart Goodwin doesn't listen to this podcast.
Well, he's a good dude, isn't he?
Best.
Stuart Goodwin is a really good guy. I think it did help, actually. But the funny thing is, just like in the Army, other services, even if you do the Special Forces, you're just doing what you do, and you don't really think of it necessarily. Other people see it differently. You're a Marine, you do what's expected. Hopefully you go a little bit above and beyond, and then that's just who you are, as opposed to other people thinking that you're really this thing over here. So I actually did recognize it, and I knew people saw me that way, but I don't think I really pushed that too much. People just kind of knew, and I would suggest, with help from people like you, I spoke pretty straight, pretty definitively, and from the heart. I think people like you really helped me do that. But the Marine thing was always in the background, and people in central Indiana and all of Indiana actually really appreciate the military background. And I think it helped me get elected, and I think it helped me gain some credibility early on when I was the mayor, because, as we discussed previously, the first year I had a lot to learn, and I think I did that, but I knew how to learn those things because of the Marine Corps.
But the Marine career certainly answered the question, is he qualified? Can he lead? There was never any doubt that you were qualified and that you could lead. The big problem was, in my view, and we would need Kyle Walker, Tom John, or Cochran or Fullback, or Laura Miller to say how you overcame that. It's one thing to say, yeah, he's qualified, but that doesn't mean you can do the job. How did you convince voters that you could do this job? The mayor of 1 million people.
Property tax was going on. Property tax fiasco was going on that year in full force.
Which had nothing to do with Bart Peterson.
Correct. But 40% of the mayors that year got thrown out of office. So many of the incumbents got thrown out of office, largely because of that, because the angst with people who were in office. All that said, what they did to income tax a few months later within the city, and then, unbelievably, the president of the city county council locked the people out of the budget meeting in 95-degree heat.
Spangle, were you locked out? You got in.
I was in. I went very early. I can't believe they let me in, but they did. And I was actually in there. But I did not know this, but outside there was a brouhaha that was more of the story than the actual budget meeting. And so some mistakes were being made. Gave me the opportunity. And then we had the debates. And I knew I wasn't debating is hard. People don't understand how hard it is to sit there and when you say a wrong thing in the debate, everybody comes after you. But
It's
hard.
pre-social media the way it is today.
Yeah,
this
right.
is 18 years ago.
So it's hard stuff, especially the first one with Jim Shella, where you're supposed to look at him for the question, and then you're supposed to turn your head 90 degrees to look at a camera and talk to the camera like you're talking to the people, even though there's only a machine there in front of you, right? So you're talking to Jim, turn your head, and then you're supposed to talk. Well, that was very uncomfortable, especially the first time you did that. So I don't think I did a very good job on the first one. It wasn't horrible, but the other three debates, I think I held my own actually. And I kind of went after him a little bit, nicely, but I took it to him a little bit. And I think all I did at that point, what I needed to do at that point was to say I was up to this job. I didn't need to win the debates. All I had to do was show that I was worthy of this. And I think that's what happened actually at that point in time. After two of those four debates, I actually thanked Mayor Peterson for his service to the city. I actually shook his hand and said, I really do appreciate all you've been doing. And he took that well, but I think he was probably a little like, well, okay, what's that about? But I actually did.
He said on this podcast, the reason he ran for a third term was to protect charter schools. That's basically a direct quote. His most enduring legacy, in my view, charter schools, he and Teresa Lubbers and so many other people, is one that you embraced wholeheartedly during that campaign. Was that a strategic decision? Like, we can't beat this guy up on everything? Or is it, as you said earlier when talking about education, it was a personal decision? This guy stood up, did something that hadn't been done before in the entire country, and I'm going to give him credit for it. As opposed to just bashing him relentlessly about everything.
You're giving our campaign too much credit to think we went through those iterations, because we did not.
Well, I concede your point, but there had to be some.
That said, what I said I was for, I was actually for. I got asked this just a couple of days ago about the Lucas Oil Stadium, and people wanted me to be against Lucas Oil Stadium because Mayor Peterson, along with Mitch Daniels, had put this thing together. And so they said, well, you need to be against that then. And I said, no, that's a good idea. I said, particularly because of convention business. It's not just the Colts that are going to be in there. There's going to be a lot of people in there, a lot of organizations in there. And so I didn't do that. I did not reflexively be for or against anything that Bart Peterson was doing. And school choice absolutely makes a lot of sense on so many levels. And it just, to restrict a parent's ability to send their kid to the school that they want to send their kid to makes no sense to me at all. Never did. And so charter schools made sense to me. And it was nothing more than that. I don't recall John and I talking about this issue or that issue. Should we be for this or for that? I was either for it or I wasn't. And that was it. That was the end of the discussion. That was it. There was no, should we say this or that? We weren't that deep. We weren't that deep. It was just how I said it, we might have talked about, but no, it was just, charter schools made sense. Lucas Oil Stadium made sense because the convention business, all that made sense to me. And it was a neighborhood program, his Jenny neighborhood program. I kept that after I was the mayor. I was very open about that. I gave him all the credit in the world, every opportunity I could for what he did on education. That took enormous courage on his part to do that. It took enormous courage. However, that said, after the election, the charter school people made a real point of cornering me within 2 weeks to get my opinions on all that.
It just shows they weren't paying attention because they didn't think you would win. Okay, so this is your chance to come clean after almost 18 years. We're recording this in mid-September of 2025. You won, might have been November 6th and November 4th of 2007. You've told me for years that you knew you were going to win, which of course I've never believed. I didn't believe it then. I still can't believe it now that you won. So, in the seat of truth, that's what you're sitting in right now. When did you think that you were going to win that election?
It was about 2 weeks out.
And what made you think that? Because that's about the same time Kyle Walker called me. I was working for his, now I wasn't working for her then, but I was at State Party. And Jennifer Hallwell had left as executive director, but Kyle Walker, who was ED of the county party, said, I remember saying this quote, I think this dude's going to win, close quote.
Again, no polling. Kyle didn't know that either, even though I
Channel
knew,
8 did a poll.
I knew he sensed it.
Mhm.
Yeah, but it wasn't. But
Sure,
the general
point taken.
public did not really think so, and neither did the TV stations. You may remember this. After the election, I went to all the TV stations, and I said, how many of you thought I was going to win it? Like 2 people out of 50 raised their hand. Then I went to the Chamber of Commerce committee.
They were fibbing.
I said, how many of you thought I was going to win? One guy raised his hand. I mean, nobody. And actually, what I said afterwards, I don't think it was disrespectful, but I said, do you think there might be some disconnect in the city here? And none of you thought I was going to win, but here I am. But the reason I thought I was going to win, and I did, I've never been untruthful. You know, I just not built that way anyway. I had over 100 Democrats, and I mean this, over 100 Democrats either whisper in my ear or tell me very softly, because they would never say it publicly. But I'm telling you, it was over 100 of them said, I never voted for a Republican in my life, and I'm going to vote for you. They said that or something like that.
And Bart Peterson in 2003 won by 20 points, maybe, beating Greg Jordan, who was the county treasurer and a wonderful, wonderful, longtime Republican.
Good dude.
I mean, Bart Peterson was a political force in the early 2000s. And it was sort of shocking for all of us who paid attention to kind of see it slowly go away.
It did. But as I say, that's the beauty of America. People get a vote. But when
you decided to run, though, let's just make sure we're clear for the podcast audience. It wasn't like Bart Peterson was at 35% when you decided to run.
Oh God, no! I had to be down 30, if not 40 points when at the primary. Had to be, absolutely. But there's a reason you run the election. Property tax gave me a little juice, not a lot. The income tax increase heading in the budget cycle was a big deal. When the council locked out the people, that was a major moment. That was a major moment when the council locked the doors of the city council building that were never locked before. That was a moment. The debates gave me some credibility. I think I held my own on the debates, and they saw I could do it. And then something else happened at the end. You get interviewed by the Star for endorsements. We knew they weren't going to endorse us. Me and John talked about it. We knew they weren't going to endorse. We didn't even prep for it.
The Mary Beth Schneider, the Marine who would be mayor article.
She did that, but before that, the
editorial board.
The editorial board. So we went in there, Dennis Ryerson and Matt Tolley and those guys, and they asked me. I said some public safety things. I think we ought to do this and this, and I remember Dennis Ryerson said, "Well, you've really given us nothing." I said, "Yeah, that's probably true," and I walked out because I knew they weren't going to endorse me. So, like I said, you can't. We did no preparation for that, zero. Even though every other organization in the world would have, but we knew they weren't going to do anything. So the Star comes out and says he has no leadership qualities. I don't know if you remember this.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
So their editorial saying we endorse the incumbent because Greg Ballard has no leadership qualities. That was great. Because the veteran
community, and I know who put that in there, and it wasn't Ryerson, and it wasn't Tim Swearens.
So
it was somebody. No, he didn't have enough juice back then. Rest in peace. But I was told who put that in there because after you won, and they wanted to come over and we just want to sit down and talk to him, and I'm like,
we'll wait on that.
Well, it was more like, I guess you're not in the apology business, but that was to put that in there. Just demonstrated how completely out of touch they were. And I knew you were unhappy about it we all were. And to quote Greg Ballard at the time, Robert, people need to feel a little pain. Like, they need to feel a little bit of pain.
Saying, get that a second. But before that, when they put that in there, my opponent used it on his commercials. That did not sit well. And the veteran community in the area was livid. And there was an email campaign under the radar that went, because I got 2 of the emails in my own inbox. Can you believe they said that? Can you believe the Star said that? Can you believe the incumbent is saying this about our 23-year Marine? I mean, it was the veteran community was livid about that. So I think that gave us some juice too. So
Rex Early had some good quotes in the paper, as I recall, based on that.
So I think there was a series of things. And as I told John at the end of the campaign, don't let me make the big mistake on TV, because video lasts forever. You can kind of get away with a bad quote here and there, but you can't get away with video. And I didn't make the big mistake on TV, and that's what we did. Now, afterward, you say it has to be a little bit of pain. Yes, that was one of my sayings. Not a lot of pain, but if you make a mistake, you do something really bad, there has to be a little bit of pain. I'm not vindictive. I did not put people in boxes for 8 years or anything. I didn't do anything like that. But there has to be a little bit of pain to let them know that, hey, I know what happened here. And so I did do that. But it's nothing like what's going on today. But there just you had to let them know.
You're listening to the Leaders and Legends podcast. Our guest today is Greg Ballard. We're discussing his life and career and his new book, Urban Republican Mayor, My Story. Public Safety is Job One. You had no public safety experience. So you weren't an MP or anything like that. I had some
security experience.
That's not patrol in Brookside Park. But yes, point taken. You did have some.
And I had been in danger, physical danger.
I went to IPS. Come on now. Went to Howe High School. They didn't qualify me. So did you... I thought it was a brilliant... I think was it Laura Miller who came up with Had Enough? I think Abdul says after he parted the Red Sea or before. But Had Enough was a great slogan. It was actually a Republican slogan in 1966 when they had big gains against Lyndon Johnson nationally. But public safety is job one. Clearly crime was an issue. I've always argued it didn't get you elected, but it was an issue that you could talk about intelligently, even though you didn't have any experience in it, direct experience, let's be generous. Your first public safety director was Scott frickin' Newman. I couldn't believe when we were doing the announcements for that you grabbed him. He's so incredibly intelligent and had, credibility for ever and ever. But is it fair to say during your 8 years as mayor, there was a slow sort of erosion in your relationship with the police that started so high because they couldn't stand Peterson?
There's a bit more to it than that, because I think that's true of every mayor, to be frank with you, and you can read it in the book.
Oh, the police hated Goldsmith. They hate all mayors eventually.
And then they hate you.
Yeah.
That's just the way the police, I wouldn't say the police, I'd say that's the way the police union is. We got Newman in there. So, and you can read it in the book. It's, when I had an unbelievable team, as you know, including you, that really helped me during transition. Then you came out a few months later. Incredible. And look where they are now. But I say it very clearly that when Newman was announced as my public safety director, you can almost see the whole city turn their heads like, damn, this mayor is serious. I think that was a big moment when we held that press conference. And I was.
Yes, we did it at the fire headquarters. I agree with that. I would also say very quickly that having Alden Williams as your deputy mayor told the community, just because I'm Republican doesn't mean you're getting shut out. Yeah. I'm going to listen to you.
Alden was key to so much of this because he knew it. He was in that community so much. It's hard to explain how important he was. But going back to Newman for a second, I told people I wanted the public safety director to be a general, not a figurehead, because just to be honest, the previous public safety director was a figurehead. I saw him get up and speak one time about how crime is. I saw him speak to a group. This is happening, and then he sat down. He didn't say what they were going to do about it.
Because you've always maintained public safety and crime are two different things.
Yes. So law enforcement and public safety are two different things. But
Thank you.
So I went into general, and I put serious people in those jobs, and so which was different than what was going on. So all that said, going back to the police thing, I think the union wants to leverage what they can. And to be honest with you, I was stunned that in my reelection, they were against me. After everything I had done for them, I did things for them they didn't even ask for. And then they were against me in the next election because I think they want to leverage the next guy. That's not how I see it. So I kind of, I don't think my relationship with the police eroded. I think their relationship with the police union eroded because that's just how they're built.
Is Frank Straub your biggest mistake?
No,
naming him as public safety director?
No, listen, the fire department loved that guy.
Well,
they loved that guy completely.
But you can't compare the fire department and the police department.
I can,
but the fire department never comes. They don't cause any problems. Rita wouldn't allow it. Chief Rita wouldn't allow it.
Thank you very much. And
because I had a great relationship with Bill Owensby.
I love Bill Owensby. I thought Owensby was great.
How high school class of 70.
Owensby was great. No question. And I got along with pretty much all of them at some point in time. But
is it fair to say that the bringing Straub on as public safety director marked a change, a shift in your relationship with the police and theirs with you?
Yeah,
because it nearly destroyed our relationship. That's what I'm asking.
I know you didn't like that choice at all, and I get that. However, I still think to this day that we were stuck in 1970s policing, and they needed to be shaken up. And I endured what I had to endure to move that along.
I agree with that.
So
we had scandal after scandal in that 2010 time period.
I woke up one morning and there's 12 pictures of policemen on the front page about all these individual things they've done. Pictures of the police on there, and nothing seemed to register. And so getting them shaken up a little bit, frankly, I still think was a good idea. I mean, how he did it was problematic, no question about it. And
that's nice spin. Don't you ever accuse me of spinning, ever.
I don't see this as you do, though. You got to understand, I don't see this as quite as much as you do.
It doesn't mean I'm right, by the way. I'll concede I have East Side Alzheimer's when it comes to him.
I think they needed to be shaken up and brought into, the 21st century of policing, and because they were using old tactics and their ways. I mean, you could read it in the book. I mean, the promotion. I mean, how crazy is that? You can put yourself up for promotion. You read a couple of books, go before a board that has nothing to do with the police department, fool them, and next thing you know, you're a sergeant. And no one thought that was a bad thing. I thought that was a horrible thing.
Let's do the flip side real quick. You talked about being a leader of men in combat. Maybe the most difficult moment or moments for a mayor are those police funerals.
Very difficult.
I thought you did a very good job of eulogizing not only the fallen officer, but also their families.
Well, it's we had 3, and one of my security guys said, he looked one day, he came to me and says, "Mayor, I can't even believe this." He goes, "It's unusual to have 1 for a mayor of 8 years, and I had 3." And it's hard to go through that, to be honest. It's almost so difficult to talk about it. There's very little of it in the book because, frankly, I couldn't get through it. There's a little mention of that, but not much. It's just so hard because the whole city comes out. The whole city comes out to celebrate the life and the sense of duty and how much people give back when they're a cop, and they do. And the individual cop is, frankly, unbelievable. It's unbelievable how good they are individually and what they do. So those are so tough. My only real problem was organizationally and how they were doing the self-improvement part. But individually, the cops are crazy good, and people have no idea what they go through every day, and it's just unbelievable.
You think you kept your promise? Would you argue you made a promise, public safety's job 1? Would you stand up in front of 500 people and say, "I kept my promise"?
Sure. if you just go to law enforcement, because for instance, go to the murder rate, right? When I came into office, you can go 10 years before, and everything was between 115 and 130. And from 9 through 12, 4 straight years, we had it in the 90s, and it was going the right way. We did very specific things. That wasn't luck. 4 years is not luck. We had it going the right way, and everybody kind of knew it until, unfortunately, we got a Democratic council, and they started messing with the crime prevention money, and it wasn't going to the right places, and so people couldn't get funded for what they were doing to keep crime off the street. So it started to switch at that point in time. But yeah, I absolutely, there's no question, because I saw public safety as bigger. I mean, it's just not putting people behind bars, arresting them, putting them behind bars. I mean, there's a whole ecosystem there, relationship with agencies, with other people in the community, making sure that there was a knowledge base out there, that there was a transparency base with all of it. And I mean, honestly, in my own mind, I looked at public safety as better sidewalks too.
Sure.
It was a broad concept to me that,
you always thought broken windows made sense.
I did. And so I think we embraced that pretty nicely. The only thing I really wanted to do, and obviously the fire department's public safety also, all those fire detectors, smoke detectors and things like that. But the one thing I did think needed to be done was, I think the police needed to update their tactics and what they were looking at and how they did things organizationally. I mean, I hate to say it like this, but they always went to these national police conferences and came back and brought nothing back and changed nothing. I mean, you have these national police conferences to learn and to get better. That's what organizations do, but they never came back and changed anything.
And when you became mayor, the Marion County Sheriff at the time, Frank Anderson, was in charge of law enforcement in the city, county, and you said forthrightly you were taking it back. Ever think, man, this is just going to be a headache forever, how many years I'm going to be mayor? Let Frank Anderson, let John Layton, let those guys deal with it, and I'll cut ribbons. And
no, just the opposite. Just the opposite. The mayor should be in charge of public safety. People expect him to be in charge of public safety, and people expect him to run the city. Just the opposite. And frankly, I thought I could do a much better job than what was occurring in also. And I'm not sure, I never talked to him about it, but I'm not sure Mayor Peterson ever thought that was a really good idea, because he did not want the sheriff to be in charge either until his hand was forced on it. But it was a council vote, and so we won the council back, and that was simple. And then I got to put it into state law that it was always going to be underneath the mayor.
You have always downplayed the bringing of the Super Bowl here. I would argue that for most people, man/woman on the street, that's the one thing they would say, what do you remember most about Greg Ballard being mayor, or what occurred while he was mayor? But you've never really beat your chest on that. Do you still feel it's a terrific accomplishment, but not on your Mount Rushmore, or have you changed a little bit?
There's one thing I did well, and pretty courageously, frankly, was I called up Jim Irsay and Mark Miles in my first month as the mayor. They didn't know me. I knew Mark, had one meeting with Mark prior, but I also knew he was the CEO of the men's tennis tour and knew that arena really well globally. I called up Mark Miles and I called up Jim Irsay, and I said, I'd like to go back and try to get the Super Bowl again, because I knew the previous bid that Bart Peterson and his team put in was really good. I knew it was a close vote. I knew that Dallas threw in money at the end to kind of get it over the line for them.
And got an ice storm in return.
Karma was beautiful, baby. It was beautiful.
Of course, we got a bunch of snow that weekend too, people forget. But yeah, it was much worse in Dallas.
Well, we were pretty warm.
Not the weekend of the Dallas Super Bowl. We
had
that surprise.
Right. That's right.
We were supposed to get 3 to 4 inches, and we got like 8 to 10, and the star went crazy, and various other things. So we kind of got lucky too.
But as I told all of the reporters at the previous 4 Super Bowls, it's going to be really warm in Indianapolis the week of our Super Bowl, and it was. It's pretty funny. I mean, I was joking with them, but then it was. But what I did was call up Jim Irsay and Mark Miles, and I said, let's run it back. I don't think either one of those guys was expecting that phone call at all. And so if I had any part in the success of the Super Bowl, I would say it was the fact that I had enough foresight, if you will. And going back to, is he good enough can he do the mayor's job? Well, right off the bat, I would suggest that I did something that really helped the city out quite a bit. But after that, when Mark formed the Super Bowl committee and all that, that was unbelievable. It was great. Gave us enormous credibility throughout the world. As I say in the book, 99.7 of the coverage was favorable. 0.3 was neutral.
Mm-hmm.
0 negative comments from the press. It seemed like the people who were counting those things. But to me, the Super Bowl was not the culmination of anything. It was just the fact that Indianapolis has been doing the right things in growing the city through sports for the last few decades. And this was just almost a natural evolution of that, as opposed to a wonderful one-off event. I thought it was an evolution of what the Sports Corp and the Visitors Bureau and everybody had been doing for a long time. That's why I kind of played it as I did. If there was one thing that I really did really well, it was make those first 2 phone calls in January of 2008. After that, the committee kind of took over. And as I say in the book pretty clearly, I did my part by staying out of the way until asked. So
it's fair to say that you were under not a lot, maybe not even little, but some pressure because the Super Bowl was thought to be a distraction. In other words, Mayor Peterson, as you said, put together a great team. Fred Glass, a wonderful bid. But while that was going on, all these other problems that eventually led to Bart Peterson's defeat were also happening. So there was some pressure on you, I think, correct me please, but like, look, that's just for the elite. Just don't pay, Spangle was out there dressed as, Patriot Paul's little brother, and was saying, hey, look, we can't have these distractions. We need to focus on crime and potholes and all this stuff. It would have been easy for you to say, we're just not going to mess with this until we tackle some of these other problems. And I honestly don't think you would have gotten that much beat back from it, especially in the neighborhoods.
No, I probably wouldn't have. However, again, I was not a young pup. I've lived around the world. I've seen how cities do things. I think I understand a bigger perspective than just down. I mean, I got known for nuts and bolts, and rightly so. But I also knew there was another big part where Indianapolis has to be seen a certain way, and it will help the city overall in so many different ways, economically and reputationally and financially, and these things, so that we can have so that Indianapolis will look good to everybody else. It goes back to what you said earlier. Did he have the wherewithal to be the mayor? Well, on lots of levels, I had a knowledge base of what communities needed, what cities needed, what states were looking for, and that sort of thing. And I think that this was one of them that I understood completely.
With regards to the Super Bowl, the convening of leadership necessary and the volunteers necessary to pull, I'm going to say pull it off. That's not the right way to say it. But to redefine the Super Bowl experience for the entire league and the world, is that maybe your proudest moment?
We did, actually. I still think Indianapolis is seen as the best one ever, still to this day. And it was 13 years ago now. Because we changed so many things. People saw us at the first Super Bowl village based on something that obviously Allison Millington did during her Olympic times. I don't know how many. She has at least 5 Emmys. I'm not sure how many she's got now.
We don't have enough time left to talk about how phenomenal Allison Millington is.
So the scars were something similar. An idea that Mark, that I'm not sure that's a good idea, but Allison wanted to do it. And Mark said, well, go ahead. If you want to try it, go ahead. And that became a massive success. There's whole stories about all of those things that are pretty fun. But the leadership was amazing. There were 8 main committees that we hired people, but there were 35 committees overall. So 27 were volunteers of those, heading those committees. CEOs, doctors, lawyers all over the place came out of the woodwork to do this for the city of Indianapolis. It was stunning what happened. and how we pulled it off, and the idea of the village and keeping that going every night. There are so many sub-stories to all of this. For instance, like David Sherman, he never said anything. I never asked him to do it, but he did it anyway. When the Super Bowl night was done at 1 or 2 in the morning, by 7 a.m., Georgia Street was spotless. No one ever mentioned that. I don't think anyone ever mentioned that. But it was spotless every morning at 7 a.m. And because I was down there looking at it, I didn't ask him to do it. He just did it. There were all sorts of committee members doing all sorts of things throughout the city that we'll never really know. There was a nice book put out about it afterwards, and a lot of that book is in my book. I took a lot of it from there. But Allison went from a really solid, really competent sports professional to a national treasure at that point in time in those 4 years. And she's still a really good friend and just an amazing person, obviously. And she did a great job as CEO. Mark Miles was the chair. He did a great job there too. And I did not know this at the time because I didn't pay much attention to this sort of thing most of the time. But 5 of the 8 committee heads were women, but they were just people that everybody knew and could do the job. And so that's just what happened. So in this male-dominated sport, we had 5 committee heads of the 8 that were women, and they did a fantastic job, but I'm not sure anybody really commented on it because we all knew who they were and they were great. And no one even questioned it or made an issue out of it. But having the breast cancer events, Supercure, foods, trees, I mean, it just goes on and on and on about what we did and how we changed the game. The first time they ever had a social media center for the Super Bowl, the bands in the village all day and night, crazy. And it was so much fun. And people really enjoyed it to a level that I don't think it's kind of hard to imagine right now that did that. But as I told people, I always saw the city that way. Lots of people in Indianapolis did not see the city that way. I always saw the city this way, that this is who we are. This is who we could be. And so this, like I say, this was a natural evolution of how good we have done things in the past. We just took it to a different level, but that was the team and it was spectacular.
Is Mark Miles the Hoosier King Midas?
I don't know, but it's got to be pretty close. You know, it does take a village to do lots of things, but he can bring in the big boys globally all the time. And I think he does that for us routinely, still working at the track, Penske Entertainment and the track and everything he does out there with Doug and with Allison is remarkable. But it did take people like Jim Morris underneath the radar, what I call the great convener, to really bring the heart to the city, with Mark doing all of this, and got Jim being really the heart of the city and bringing people together for all the right reasons. It just took.
The state was helpful.
The state was very helpful. Georgia Street took $12 million. The city put into state and federal money, did the rest of it, and it's a treasure to this day. There's a whole sequence to all of that, obviously, but that was Bill Brown's idea, Ratio Architects. That was not my idea. It wasn't Mark's idea. It was Bill Brown's idea, who took it to Mark, who brought it to me. And I said, well, that sounds great. And Mark figured all that out, how to pay for it all. He did all that. And
did you zip line?
I did not. You know, it's kind of funny. In the Marine Corps, nothing really bothered me. But as I got older, heights started to bother me a little bit. And I just declined. I declined. On one level, I wish I had, but you know what? The last thing you need to do is see the mayor freaking out on a zip line in the middle of it. So I don't know what that was, but
I know Jennifer Hollowell would never have let you done it pre-election.
Yeah, but I've gotten a little gun shy about a couple things. I got some stuff going on. For instance, if I'm watching a movie and there's a movie of a cliff and you can see below, the back of my legs get numb.
Vertigo-ish?
Kind of, yeah. The movie. Not real,
right?
The movie. And so there's something going on with me in that regard. I don't know what it is. It doesn't seem to affect me on a daily basis very much, but I know it's there.
Was Super Bowl week the most fun you had? Because I'm also going to mention, Butler making it to the championship game, the Final Four and then the national championship game. There were other big events while you're here. I know how much you love the Speedway and the 500. You always have. You've always been a big fan. You were a fan of the Colts when the Colts were in Baltimore growing up, as I recall. That was your team.
I was.
And obviously the Pacers did pretty well most of the time, especially towards the end when you were mayor. So you had all these sort of events, but really nothing that brought national coverage like the Super Bowl did.
The Super Bowl was fun. It was honestly, I love the Super Bowl. Don't get me wrong. We did a great job. Almost the 4 previous Super Bowls when we were kind of, me and Chris Gall of Visit Indy were kind of going into Radio Row and trying to promo our own Super Bowl. That was enormous fun. So we were talking to sports jocks from all the way from Hawaii to New York about that. I honestly, that was incredible fun doing that.
Radio Row was fun in the Super Bowl that we went to when the Colts lost to the Saints, but that was a good time.
It was a really good time, and I'm happy. So when I think of the Super Bowl and all the village stuff that went on, I couldn't get past the village. I couldn't go back into the village past Wednesday because it was so crowded and people were so happy and everybody wanted a picture. So I mean, it took me an hour to move half a block one time. And I realized I couldn't go back in there because people just wanted pictures. They were having so much fun. Nobody was rude. It wasn't like it wasn't moving. It was moving. I wasn't moving because everybody wanted a picture, which was fine. It wasn't, but it wasn't necessarily because it was me. It was because I was kind of symbolic of the city and the Super Bowl. And so I understood that, but I just couldn't, I couldn't get back in there because I couldn't move very much. But it was so much fun to see everybody and seeing LMFAO when we're screaming at the, computer screens a mile away in the public safety center saying, get off the stage, get off. We were screaming at the computer scenes, at the computer screens, not the band. Because so many people were kind of crowding it, but like in typical Hoosier fashion, nothing happened, right? Nothing happened. Lots of things. There were, other than a couple of pickpockets, it was pretty safe in the village. Really nothing happened. And this is another thing I mentioned in the book. Pastor Harrison of the 10 Point Coalition put word on the street. This is where it's important to have relations on the street, that he did not want to see any violence during the 10 days of the Super Bowl. We did not have a murder during the 10 days of the Super Bowl. Did not have a murder during the 10 days of the Super Bowl. Had one the next day after everybody left. But he put the word out and they held to it because of the respect that he had on the street. So people forget those things. That sort of thing, Dave Sherman cleaning up every day.
The police themselves doing, they
were incredible. Incredible.
They made their share of overtime, but they were phenomenal.
They were great. Fire department was great. Everybody was really, really good during that time frame. Everybody pitched in and did their thing, and they wanted to make the city look good, and they did.
Was there any doubt that you were going to run for a second term? At any point, do you say, you know what, I've kind of accomplished what I set out to do in a lot of ways, and there's nothing wrong with being James K. Polk here and just do one term and right off to the sunset? Was there?
I didn't think I was quite finished on the first term, to be honest with you. So there's a little bit of funny thing about the Super Bowl was if I did not run, I wouldn't have been the mayor for the Super Bowl. So I kind of wanted to go to the game. I wouldn't suggest that was the main reason, but my tickets might have been different if I was not the mayor.
Parking would have been.
Parking, yeah. Parking. Oh God, do I miss parking? But I felt like there was some unfinished business I wanted to get done, and I think we did that. I wanted to set some things in stone, and I think we did a pretty good job with that by having a second term. I've told you before, I was so tired mentally and physically. That third term just didn't seem possible to me. If I could have taken a year off, I would have done it, but that's not how it works. So, but the election, I was pretty confident about the re-election. I told Jennifer Hollowell all the time, just tell me I'm at 51. Tell me if I'm at 51,
that's what you got,
and I'll be happy. And she never said it went below 51. So there you go. And I was happy. And then I acted like I had a complete mandate and did.
Is it okay if I assert your first term was better than your second term?
Only because you were part of it. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I don't know that that's cause and effect, but your first term, here's why. And obviously, the talent you had in their second term is phenomenal. I mean, Ryan Vaughn is your third chief of staff. I mean, that's insane.
I was so blessed.
Along with Adam Tees and
Lori Miser in Public Works when David Sherman left. I had incredible people.
David Rosenberg.
Oh my God.
Jason Dudich came back. Obviously, Adam Collins, Darren Kintner. The list goes on and on. On and on. To me, and this is just speaking politically, so don't get the vapors. You were a very strong mayor in absolute terms. But relative to the expectations expressed to me about you by people, your first term is almost off the charts, immeasurable how well everybody did, but you did, because you also had the meltdown of the CIB, which you inherited, and you also had the Great Recession, which obviously had nothing to do with you. You had a change in the White House, but obviously President Obama was very good to you, went out of his way to be kind. I just thought your first term was a big, I can't say what I want to say, but you get the point of, yeah, all of you thought I was just some rube. And 4 years later, now look where we are. That's one of my fondnesses for the first term, is because most people thought you just couldn't do the gig. Who is this guy? And every frickin' person, and it has some truth, but if I had $1 for every time you frowned when somebody said, oh, Bart Peterson lost it more than you won it. And I'm sitting there thinking, you'll never get a street paved. If it's up to me, a sidewalk fixed. Am I overstating it?
But they did get their street fixed, because like I say, I forgave everybody and I governed for everybody. But I think what you're saying,
the haters had no business getting their sidewalk fixed, which I guess is why you didn't put me in DPW.
Yeah, because I did fix them.
We fixed Amos Brown stuff. God love him.
But you're right. That was there. There's no question about that. And I remember you telling me later on when, the late great, I think you told me about late great Matt Tully when you mentioned to him, did you ever expect any of this? And he said, absolutely not. And he says it was the most remarkable political story he's ever seen. Something like that.
It's the most remarkable political event in Indianapolis history, in my view, is your election and re-election. Obviously, Richard Lugar changed everything,
right?
But beyond that, not only because in 7, you were running against somebody who was certainly a terrific mayor. I mean, anyone who says
$4 million.
Yeah. Anyone who says Bart Peterson wasn't a very good mayor, that's asinine. And I've always argued that between the two of you, there really isn't that much difference philosophically. It's execution, priorities,
right? That
sort of thing. But for you to win in 11, to me, is a much greater political achievement, because you had the record you had to defend, but also because of all the Democrats who had registered in 2008 to vote for Barack Obama for president. I've said this, I said it to him when he came on. Mitch Daniels winning Marion County in 2008 by 14,000 votes, or 17,000, while Barack Obama won the county by way more than 100,000 votes.
108,000.
That and your win in 11, after the Democrats had this much enlarged pool of voters who really, honestly, they wanted to vote for Barack Obama. So they had this greater list. And Ed Tracy, if anyone knows Ed Tracy and Joel Miller are phenomenal political operatives. For you to win in 11, I personally think it's the greatest political achievement in the history of this city.
Well, I appreciate that. I had a lot of good people around me, as you well know. Jennifer Hollowell running that campaign, but
Marty Obst, Kyle Walker.
Oh God, it was
M-Rob, Megan Robertson.
She was.
I don't know if she goes by M-Rob anymore, but that's all I know.
It was, and to be honest, I wanted validation. It was one to be. It's okay to win the mayor for one term. I think that says a lot. I think we got a lot done that first year, but I wanted a lot of that to try to become more of the culture of the city, to stick there. But I also wanted validation that what happened in '07 was real and meant something. And if I did not win re-election, I think that would have been suspect at that point in time, even though it would have been still would have been a good story. But then would have said, "See, he wasn't up to it." But if I got reelected, then now that story changes. And the fact that my numbers heading into the third term were in the 70s in a Democratic city told me everything I needed to know at that point in time. But I was happy I got reelected, to be frank with you. And it was a good, I think it was a nice achievement, no question about it. But also people saw me as a practical, moderate, get the job done kind of guy. And I think that played out really nicely, because it's funny, we're a little bit more polarized now than we have been in the past at all levels. But me being kind of in the middle, being rational, played really well for me politically.
Proudest accomplishment of your first term?
The first term, getting through the recession, I think, was probably
AAA credit rating, that kind of thing.
All of that was. People forget how difficult that was. I walked in on that, and it was so difficult to keep things going. We did not lay anybody off. Cities all over the country were laying people off. We did not. We attrited people that we did not backfill, but we did not lay anybody off. I was really proud of that. But it was so difficult. I remember David Reynolds telling me all the time, "Don't worry, Mayor, in about 2 or 3 more years, the money's going to start to flow." It never flowed. After all 8 years, it never really flowed.
And if David Reynolds can't make it flow, nobody can.
Yeah, he was unbelievable.
Genius.
And so it was, so I get it. I think getting through the recession, getting credibility obviously was important. And I think I did a pretty good job of that with help like yours. But getting through that recession was so difficult. I wouldn't say that's the best thing we did overall, but I do think that's the best thing in the first term.
Parking meter deal happened the first term.
That was a great deal.
Water deal with citizens happened the first term.
Barely. I think we signed that in August, I think. So that was that led to Rebuild Indy, which
I think is
huge.
Obviously one of the main reasons you got reelected, I would just say, in my view.
Yeah. That was a big part of it. Parking meters, we were from 330,000 net to 3 million net in 3 years. We don't have any, we just take the money. There's no pensions.
And if you hadn't done it, the new mayor would have done it because of just social media and smartphones and all that. Somebody was going to do it to where you could change it on your phone. I'm not taking away credit from you. I'm saying is that it was such a damn good idea that somebody was going to do it because there's just too much potential there for money.
Maybe eventually, but I would suggest to you just a couple of years before, they had the mayor's office in the council and they didn't do it. And all the technology 2 years prior was the same. And we did it.
But smartphones came out, got big after you became mayor. Because Chris Cotterill got a new smartphone every 3 days. I've never seen a grown man so happy with a phone in my entire life.
You could have done what we did 3 to 4 years before. And then as the technology upgraded, you kept going. But a lot of this was, this is the ability to act. And we had a bias for action. It's in, I say that. Just like we changed the MAC.
Mayor's Action Center.
Yeah, the Mayor's Action Center. It could have been done before, but it wasn't. The parking meters could have been done before because Chicago did it years before we did. But no one did it. So we did it.
But the Chicago parking meter deal is the worst deal since Russia sold us Alaska for $7 million.
They upgraded the technology. That's the part I'm referring to. The money that they gave away and spent in 3 years for a 75-year deal was just crazy stupid. But we didn't do that. We took a little money up front, and then we said that the money from the parking meters will go to the mayor and the council for the next 50 years. That's what we did. We didn't take all the money up front. We took a little bit that helped with things like the Broad Ripple parking garage, but we didn't take all the money up front, not even close. Most of it came afterwards. Chicago took all the money up front and then spent it in 3 years.
And Mayor Hogsett, during his time in office, has extended that deal.
Well, the council has to approve it every 10 years. And they did the first time. And I think everybody kind of likes the deal because it's more infrastructure money for the city.
You received a considerable amount of grace from Bart Peterson. You're right. During the transition, it wasn't a close relationship. And I can understand it from their point of view.
Sure.
It was absolutely shocking. But, and then one of his deputy mayors, Melina Kennedy, ran against you in 11. But in those 4 years, he could have been priming for a run. Let's say he goes, I want to run again. And we've seen it happen. And I'm going to guess, I wasn't paying too much attention at the time because I just wasn't, that Stephen Goldsmith did the same for Bart Peterson. How important is it to you to be graceful toward your successor? Because the news media and other people would certainly love if you were publicly, loudly, and, somewhat sharply critical of Mayor Hogsett. Is there a sense that, hey, look, that's just not what we do in Indianapolis?
There is a sense that that's not what we do in Indianapolis. That's exactly true. I may speak publicly about this issue or that issue, and I'm sure we all have done that, but publicly, no, absolutely not, because you want to give your successor grace. And Yvonne Shaheen, she told me early on about how she had told somebody, don't go after me. And then, so I got the sense early on, that's just not what happens in Indianapolis. And when you look back at the history, that is really true. Previous mayors do not bash the current mayor or successive mayors publicly. Just hasn't been done. And I won't do it. I will and have said some things privately, like I might have done this or that. But you won't see me doing that publicly.
And if Joe Hogsett picks up the phone, you're taking that call.
Yes, I am.
I remember you and Bart Peterson. Remember you did that TV interview or commercial or something together to get rid of the township assessors?
We did an interview together, and he was
after you were mayor.
That's actually his first year. Actually,
that's right.
Year. And I've seen him many times since, and we're actually doing a honorary co-chair with KIB right now on the fundraising. But also, many times I've seen him, and I always tell him, the fact that you're working with the Crystal House, that seems to be the perfect fit. And I told him, I said, I can't imagine a better fit for you than running that organization. He has since moved on from that, but I thought that was a good fit. And I gave Bart Peterson all the credit, every chance I could, about what he did for charter schools, because that was enormously courageous.
Your second term, you had some significant changes, but you remained stable in how you ran the city. Your book is dedicated to your 4 chiefs of staff. It's Paul Okeson, Chris Cotterill, Ryan Vaughn, and Jason Dudich. Most people, I think, have a second term where the talent starts to go away because they have enormous opportunities because of working in the mayor's office. I mean, working for you changed all of our lives. Did you ever feel that? Did you ever feel like, man, it's getting tougher to find people to work for me? Like, what is going on?
Just the opposite. People wanted to work for us because of the way we did business. What's the right thing to do? You knew that was the first question I was ever going to ask. What's the right thing to do? And people appreciated that. I always joke, and I said it last night at an event. When the people left after the first term, they didn't really leave. They're just getting paid by somebody else now. They're working over here and they get paid by somebody else, but actually they're still part of the team. I mean, Sherman would call in to Lori Miser, and somebody else, they'd call in to their successors, whoever now has that job in the Ballard administration. They would call in and try to help, and they were always a phone call away in case we needed the help. They really never left the administration, even though they were working for somebody else. In heart, I think they were still with us. So we not only got great people afterwards, people like Adam Tees, for God's sake, who's unbelievable. And Ryan Vaughn came in to be the chief of staff. I could go on and on and on about all that, all those great people. But, the Shermans and you and others were still around to help out. And so I actually think we added depth in the second term as opposed to worrying about the talent level.
Paul Okeson, what did he bring as chief of staff to you?
I'm nothing without Paul Okeson. The sense of calm, and he knew what he had, which was kind of a an unformed political person here. So he kind of walked me through what I should be doing, what I should be thinking about. He knew everybody at the state house. He knew the political system, if you will. Remember, he had just taken a job with an engineering firm like 3 or 4 months before.
He had to give up that Buick.
So he gave that up to come do that. And how he schooled me up and told me, no, this and that, that's wrong. I'll never forget one time. It actually was regarding the media. And I said, well, if they're going to do this, then we'll just do this. And he looks at me and goes, Mayor, that's 100% wrong. That's when I knew I had the right guy. If you're in the military, you know exactly what I'm saying. Because if everybody agrees, somebody's redundant. That's what Colin Powell used to say. If everybody agrees with you all the time, nothing's going to get done. You got to have that little bit of friction to move things forward. And Paul was the right guy to talk me down or to say, you need to be thinking about this and thinking about this. When I was about to go off and do something that was a little bit crazy as a mayor, you got to think about this. Now, this is what's going to happen here. And this is where they're coming from and that sort of thing. So those first 2 years that he was my chief of staff, he was phenomenal. As he knows, I describe him like this. I say it all the time. He's the only guy you can go into because he was the number 2 guy in the city, right? The chief of staff was in our administration was the second most powerful person there. You could go in to see Paul Okeson and he'll tell you no. And you'll like him more as you leave than when you went in. That's who Paul Okeson is.
He read you very well.
He did. He really
read
did.
you very well.
He really did.
I've said this. I said it to Matt Tully, and he wrote a column after your reelect. No Chris Cotterill, no water deal, no rebuild Indy, no second term. Is my logic on the money?
Yeah, I think so.
Let me start over.
I have that article.
No Chris Cotterill, no water deal. We can take the politics out of it. I don't believe that Chris had the right mentality to work not only with, because, it wasn't a bunch of Reaganites at the Citizens Energy Group, as we should say, gently and nicely. So I don't know how much they were cheering for your reelection, but they negotiated in good faith. We had Nate Feltman on our team, which is obviously terrific. But Chris had the patience, and he was terrific. And this is where I dealt with him the most, even with the other things. It was never about Chris Cotterill with water deal. He had to deal with Kerry Likens, who was no day at the beach. Well, and Chris was in a situation where he always saw the long term. Like, it doesn't matter how many times Kerry and I argue. It doesn't matter how many times we fuss about numbers. The goal is to get this done. And I give him, and Michael Huber, obviously, David Sherman, enormous credit for getting that deal done.
I saw it a little differently from Chris. Chris was actually my chief of staff at the time, still.
Correct.
And he also acted as the main city legal for the Citizens deal. We brought in Nate. That's when I first met Nate. I realized, oh my God, this guy's really, really good. And so we brought him as outside counsel, which was a major thing. But Chris was not only brilliant in what he did, but he was also just enough of a bulldog to stick with it and not roll over, if you will. I mean, Chris got the best deal for the city that he could. He wanted to get every dime that he thought the city was owed, and he did. And I think he did. Sometimes when you're dealing in things like that, they think the city's going to roll over, the state's going to roll over and just make a deal. He didn't really do that. He got every dime he could for the city that he thought was fair.
Right.
That he thought was fair. And just the right amount of bulldog in him for me. And you're right, he was patient, but he had to have been frustrated sometimes.
Oh my God.
He had to, because that was all there. And that went on for a while. There's a whole series of things that happened, obviously, with Sherman and others that helped put that together. But in retrospect, it was absolutely the right thing to do. And I think the citizens have been served so well because of that. And then when you add on top of that, when the renegotiation with the EPA and the Department of Justice over the sewers that Sherman inherited, which saved, to be honest with you, over $1 billion for the ratepayers that nobody even knows about. It's crazy what we did with what happened underneath the ground, and it's going to serve the citizens of Indianapolis well for 100 years.
Probably your biggest long-term accomplishment?
Physically, I don't think there's any question about that. I still think the best thing that we did was to create a new generation of leadership for the city and the state. But talking physically and how to improve the city for the long haul, it was definitely the sewer work, the stuff right underneath the ground that nobody even knows about. Frankly, they don't know what we did.
I don't know what we did.
And read the book. It's right in there.
I mean, I know what we did, but I can't explain it. How about that?
It was a massive, on both levels, putting the water and wastewater into citizens and then re-engineering at a massive rate of savings and making it much better from what the EPA and the Department of Justice originally approved is stunning achievement that virtually nobody knows about.
As second terms or third terms or however many terms you want begin, there's always a question of how do we keep the momentum going? Okay, we did great things in the first term, certainly enough to get reelected in a Democratic city. But what's next? That's politics in a lot of ways in government. What's next? I always say the greatest 1-2 punch in history that I can think of, American history, is Leslie Groves, who went from building the Pentagon to then running the atomic bomb project. That's unbelievable. You didn't have that problem in your start of your second term because your chief of staff was Ryan Vaughn. And besides his just innate talent, your second term, through no fault of your own, I will gently and kindly say, resulted in the Democrats winning the city county council, which completely changed the dynamics of governing and politics. And you had the best chief of staff you could possibly have had equipped to deal with this shift.
Absolutely, because he was the president of the city county council just before. So I remember it was actually Bob Grand that came up with that idea. And as far as I remember, I know Bob Grand was deeply involved in it, but I do think it was his idea.
Because Ryan had just gone to Barnes and Thornburg.
Yeah, he was at Barnes and Thornburg. Mm-hmm. And Rob mentioned it to me. I said, oh my God, that's a really good idea. See, people don't understand. I'm not even sure Ryan understands how good he is, frankly, but he's very smart, very savvy, gets along with everybody, has talked to everybody since his 20s. He's just part of the city, and everybody kind of likes him. Plus, he's just got just that little bit of political savvy in him to know what's going to happen, and he can see things happening beforehand. It's just amazing who he is, and I think if he went back to public service, he would do a great job. I think he's really happy where he is with Exos, formerly Sandy Solutions. But on one level, I kind of want him to get back into it because he'd be such a great guy. So he comes in as the former council president, and the shift to the Democrats. However, I would suggest to you that the first 2 years, we still ran over the council. I hate to say it like that. That sounds mean and evil. And I don't mean that, but I mean, I think our momentum coming in from the first term was so strong. They were trying to find their feet, find their sea legs. Well, we were just going. We were just keeping going. And so it took them about 2 years before they figured out that, gee, we can push back a little bit here. Took them a while. And then they did start to push back a little bit. And, but the only thing that really didn't get done that I really wanted to get done was the Criminal Justice Center. But it did get done. It just didn't get done the way I wanted it to get done. But it did get done. And they used our plans to do a lot of it. Different place than we were probably going to put it, but it's okay. So it did get done. I don't like the way it's financed, but that's elections have consequences. But other than that, I think despite some of the friction involved with working with the Democratic Council, I think generally we got done. We got the pre-K done, right? Took a while. It was harder, but we got it done.
And I remember Paul Okeson calling me when Chris Cotterill said he was leaving as chief of staff and asked me if I would be interested. And I said, I don't know. Who else are you talking to? And he says, well, Ryan Vaughn's and I chuckled and I said, if you can get Ryan Vaughn, that's the guy. And he proved to be that while he was there.
Definitely.
Because that was a tough, you're talking about the council, right? You had just beaten the Democrats again, as you like to say. They spent, was it $8 million and they're 0-2? Was that your phrase?
Yes, it is. They spent $8 million against me and they're 0-2.
So, they had won the council. They're filling the oats a little bit. They got a new generation of leadership coming up. But then Ryan leaves or announces he's leaving. And I believe it's September of 2014.
21.
No,
Oh,
2014.
I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm in the wrong years. Yeah.
That's
14.
all right.
So it was about a year and a half to go.
And that's right.
Do you know how that happened?
Well, just real quick.
Okay. Go ahead.
You and I are sitting in South Carolina at the same table at Paul Okeson's wedding, and you say, Vaughn's leaving. Why don't you come be my chief of staff? And I said, I don't know if you remember my question, but I immediately said, are you running for a third term? And you said, I don't think so. And then I said, I'm not your guy.
Yeah.
And Jason Dudish became your chief of staff. And again, you somehow lucked into the perfect chief of staff for your final year and a half.
He said just the opposite question. He said, he asked me, are you running again? I said, I don't think so. He goes, then I'll do it. He said, if you were,
I know, it's so great.
He said, if you were running again, I wouldn't do it. He said, because I'm not your guy. But if you're here to close it out, I'll do that. It was just the opposite of your question. And so that made a lot of sense. But Ryan, just so you know, people should know that Ryan came to me. He was, those jobs are hard. I always joked that people went to work from 9 to 5, but the work got done from 5 to 9. And they went in afterwards for drinks or dinner or whatever. And a lot of work got done from 5 to 9 in the city of Indianapolis. Chief of staff, department heads, everybody talking to everybody else that they need to be talking to at that point in time. So long days for those guys and for the chiefs of staff and others. Ryan did it over 2 years, almost over 2.5 years, actually. He came to me one day and said, just so you know, the Sports Corp has asked me to take over. And I looked at him and said, Ryan, you got to take that job. I said, I didn't try to convince him at all to stay. I said, you got to take that job. It's too important for the city and the state. So you got to have that job. And
like he did for every other damn thing, he knocked it out of the park. Him and his staff.
He knocked it out of the park. And he was great at it. And then I was looking for a chief of staff to close things out. And I had to know pretty quickly whether I was going to run again because that affected that decision. At that time, I hadn't thought about it, but I did think about it within the next couple of months. And I can't remember when I announced it, probably November, something.
Announced it at the city market, as I recall, that you weren't.
I did.
No regrets?
No, but to be honest with you, my team knew what I was going to say.
Yeah.
But there was 2 or 3 seconds when I was about to actually say the words, and I looked at Winnie. Winnie looked really sad. And I almost changed my mind in those 2 to 3 seconds.
At the city market?
At the city market. When everybody on my team knew what I was going to say, but I wasn't going to do it again. But I really thought about changing my mind after I looked at Winnie for those 2 to 3 seconds. Nobody knows that story. And, but I did, but I went ahead and said what I planned on saying, but and it was the right call. It was absolutely the right call. For me, it was.
You had probably, in my view, the most interesting relationship with the news media of any elected official not named Donald J. Trump. They clearly didn't think you were going to win in the beginning. You became a story as momentum built through the late summer and early fall. Mary Beth Schneider, as mentioned before, wrote that terrific article about you and your candidacy, your life story.
The headline was different.
Correct.
2 a.m. than the one that came out in the paper. And it wasn't the Marine who would be mayor. It was like, mayor can't raise money compared to his own castle or something like that. I can't remember what it was. But it was a good article.
It was. Then you win, and you win on Tuesday. I start working for you on Thursday because Wednesday morning after you win, Jim Shella and Hester got in your office at county headquarters, and I was aghast at that happening. We went on a tour of media places. I remember when you walked in Julia Carson's funeral procession.
Sure did.
We got some coverage. We got some good coverage for that. It was a gesture on your part that I thought was needed politically, for lack of a better term.
I think it played well there, but also, as I said, you pay homage to those who serve, and she served.
And I remember Sam Carson, I think, was the one who invited you. You got a phone call in the parking lot of Channel 13, and you put your hand over the phone and you said, Sam Carson wants me to walk in the Julia Carson procession to the State House tomorrow. What do you think? And I said, you absolutely should do it. It'd be a really strong gesture that gets remembered. Do you remember your response to me?
I don't, but I do remember you were the one who told me you really should do that, and that was a good idea, and I certainly concurred.
Your response was, "Well, put on your walking shoes." It was you and me and Greg Wilson,
right? But you do need to pay respect, whether you agree or disagree. You need to pay respect to those who served.
But you did but your first year was rough in terms of the media. You talked about getting your footing, and gradually, I mean, no one has an A+ relationship with the news media, but how do you feel you dealt with them? Were they fair to you? Do you think you just got better at it as you got more experienced and seasoned?
I did get better. People would tell me all the time, boy, you look better at this. You look like I said, well, I always would say back, well, you're supposed to get better at your job, aren't you? And so, and I knew they meant it as a compliment, but still, I think overall the media was fair to me. I don't think any question about that. There were a couple of reporters who did a couple of things here and there that were kind of, it's like they come out of journalism school and they're taught to go after the big guy and take him down. Right. And I actually mentioned that to a couple of seasoned journalism people, and they did not deny that. They did not deny that. So I had a couple of youngsters coming after me, trying to take me down right out of school, which I thought was very odd. So there's a little friction there, but overall it was very, very fair. The only thing that really bothered me early on, and you were right in the middle of it, was the vision thing. Because it kept saying you had no vision. This is just me trying to logic this thing out. They kept going after this, even though I put out a vision statement that I actually thought was pretty good, but they didn't care because they had the hook, right? So they kept going. But I couldn't see where they ever asked any other elected official their vision like they asked that of me. And I thought that was a little odd that they were just coming after me for that all the time. And they never asked Mitch Daniels his mission statement or Evan Bayh his mission statement. Then no one asked those people that, but they asked me that. And so I thought that was a little odd. It bothered me for a little bit, to be honest with you. So the funny thing is I wound up winning 3 vision awards, local, national, and international. And I still have those. I kept all of those.
We had to take care of that in one of our State of the City speeches, the vision thing. And it was all rounding into shape in 2010 for 2011. You really were starting to have a
State of the City at the Museum of Art.
That's where we did it, yeah. Remember, because teleprompter broke.
Well, something came on the line. Now, it's not in the book, but I actually fell down the stairs before the speech. Kevin Kellums and I, he was aghast. I actually fell down a short set of, I was in pain during that whole thing. He was wondering, should we go to the hospital? He asked me, should I go to the hospital? I stood up. I said, I don't think so. I think I can do this. And then the teleprompter had a little Microsoft prompt came on in the middle of the screen. So I couldn't look at the teleprompter as a whole. I had to look at like the top line because there's like one and a half lines that I could see. The good thing is, as you well know, we had rehearsed that so much. Yeah. I had it in front of me. I was turning the pages as we were going, but I could still look at the teleprompter and I got enough of it and I could remember because we had rehearsed it so much that it kept going. And I think that's when one of your guys, I think you told me Ed Tracy, said,
one of my guys, Ed Tracy.
Yeah, your Democratic alternative there.
I gladly take that.
I think he said to you, I think you told me this, we're in trouble or something like that. Or
I thought that was the most important speech. It's easy for me to say, right? Obviously, because I was involved. But the most important speech, you laid out everything. You had some momentum in terms of real accomplishments. You delivered it so well. No one knew the glitch. I mean, I certainly didn't. The news media was very favorable in its coverage of it. I think that really propelled you politically. And I know discussing politics, necessarily wasn't your thing, much to my chagrin.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Joy would be the opposite. Do you think you got politically smarter?
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. No question about it. I mean,
during your time, running up to that reelect?
Yeah. Oh, no question about it. And I can start to foresee things, and because you had schooled me up so well on so many things that if I say this, then this is what they're going to do, and if you do this, this. So I had a lot of that going on at that point in time, and I thought I was pretty good about that. The one thing that I learned, and I didn't want to believe this, but it certainly was true, was you take care of the problems right up front, and instead of I thought the substance of the policy would win the day. It's not always true in a political atmosphere. You have to tamp down the opposition right up front, because if you think the policy is going to win because people will see the value of it, and then they beat you up along the way, you still could lose. So you don't let them beat you up along the way. You don't let them beat you up at the beginning. You take care of that. And I think you and others were really good at calling people or talking to them before, and I probably didn't even know half of what you did. You talk to him, he's going to say this, he's going to say this, he's going to be there, he's going to propose this. Do you have any feeling about it? I assume you guys did a lot of that because so much things kind of went smoothly past from mid-second year on. Things got a lot smoother. And I assume that was what was happening. We got more in sync. And I learned that you tamp down the opposition immediately, as opposed to, okay, here's the substance, let's go fight it out. Because it's so much harder on the back. It's so much harder if you haven't tamped down the opposition at the beginning.
And you learned.
Yes, I did.
Even though you said everybody knows, I don't need to say it again, that you actually had to say it again.
Yeah, right.
Not everybody knew.
That's right. So
you also got lucky. We were talking about transition from first to second. Melania Kennedy is very smart, was very political, strong resume. She had lost in 6 to Carl Brizzi for prosecutor and had learned from that in a lot of ways. It kind of became clear. That re-election was no gimme by any measurement. And I thought that you were very fortunate to have the foresight. And I remember Nick Weber and Paul Olkeson and I talking to you about it specifically at your house. You got Kyle Walker and Jennifer Hollowell at the height of their powers. And I thought the combination of the three of you, plus Cotterill as chief of staff, it couldn't have come together at a better time. Because I know politics just kind of wasn't your thing. And you didn't always have to be dragged kicking and screaming into doing what's best politically, but it was never your first option. I've never been in a meeting with you as mayor doing city business where you ever asked about a contribution, if someone supported you, any of that. It was never top of mind for you. But in 11, you had to be worried more about politics than perhaps you wanted to be. The team you put together with Jennifer and Kyle at the top, I just thought you couldn't have gotten a better group of people.
Yeah, that's fair. I still didn't make decisions based on politics, as you well know. We worried about politics on the back end, but for those things to come out, for instance, we signed the water deal just a few months before the re-election. Mm-hmm. So we still did all the right things there. Jen Hollowell and Kyle Walker, I married them later on. They're still married and have they're what a great couple. I hadn't thought that I got them at the height of their powers, but that's probably an accurate statement, even though Jen's really still powerful and still doing a great job. And
Kyle Walker's turned out okay.
Turned out he's in the state senator. So he's doing okay too. But both of them are all in, that's for sure. Kyle was from the very beginning, as I say very explicitly in the book. He was there from the very beginning. I cannot begin to tell my appreciation of him for years and years and years. Jen came in for the second term, and she just, I don't remember really ever talking to her. She just kind of fell into the role. I don't know if you did all that or not, but it just kind of fell in and took over. And
we had a meeting at the Rathskeller too, as I recall. But she was the perfect political mind for you at the time, because she understood that it was politics and doing things for political optics. I'm proud of you. I don't think you've ever rolled up your sleeves. I'm proud of you. I don't know that you've ever climbed aboard a piece of equipment. And when you work in the political world, a lot of the times you're working with candidates who love that sort of thing, that really embrace the political part of it. Carl Brizzi, to me, is still one of the top 5 best natural politicians I've ever met. But you just were never going to do that. And she still found a way to be like, okay, so let's play to your strengths.
She did. And I think she really did in that regard. She knew what I was going to do and what I was not going to do. And I told her straight up, and that I said, just so you know, Jen, my reputation is more important than my reelection. I told her that right off the bat. And I'm not going to ruin my reputation. I like my reputation. I've worked a long time for this, not just political reputation. I'm talking about my Marine Corps. I don't want kids. I got kids, and at that time in college, I don't want them dissed. I don't want any of this to happen. My reputation is way more important than me getting reelected. But she understood that about me, knew what I like. I mean, I can't remember the name of the gentleman that worked us on commercials. Good dude. But he would ask me to smile or emote or something, and I said, I did. And he said, no, you didn't. And I looked at Jen and goes, no, you got to do it again. So there was a lot of that going on that sort of thing. But you're right. She was really good for me. She was really good for me, did the right things at the right time, and got me to where I needed to go. And I trusted her. I mean, I trusted her. I didn't ask too many questions. I wasn't asking about the polling and the crosstabs. I didn't do any of that stuff. I did none of that stuff. I think most people do. I did none of that. I said, are we at 51? She said, yes. I said, okay, let's go on. That's all I said to her.
We have a few more minutes with Mayor Greg Ballard. We're discussing his book, Urban Republican Mayor, My Story. On your last day in office, I'm guessing December 31st, 2015.
Right. I still had half a day on the 16th, January 1st of 16, but I didn't go in.
On your last day in office, you did something no mayor had done, because it really wasn't an option for them. So let's be judicious. You called me a few days before, it was late December. You said on your last day as mayor, you were going to officiate a same-sex marriage. And I hadn't worked for you for 5 years at that point. Yeah. And I'm like, that's a great story. That's just a great story. You have to do something in the media about it. It's the perfect way for you to go out. And you, with your usual media instinct, says no one will care. And I said, I think they will care. And I said, let me ask. And I asked Matt Tully what he was doing on that day. He was on vacation. And I said, would you like to cover this as an exclusive? Just be there. Write the coda for Mayor Ballard. Because the Star didn't endorse you in 11 either, which...
That's right.
Again, speaking of East Side Alzheimer's, I still hold a grudge about that. Matt supported Melina Kennedy in his columns, but Erica, God love her, supported you in her columns, Erica Smith.
She did.
Tully came back early because he wanted to cover this. And the reason I bring that up is, A, I think it was a perfect way to end your time in office, but it was also on the heels of RFRA. The Religious Freedom Restoration Act that so roiled Indiana and Indiana politics. How did you come to the position you took during RFRA? And is that the moment, is that the event that you're secretly most proud of Greg Ballard for?
Wow. You mean the RFRA part, not the marriage part?
Your
right?
stance on it, because it all connected there at the end.
I'm very open that was the most difficult 10 days of my 2 terms. And I had already announced I wasn't running again. And these were my friends at the State House.
The spring of 2015.
Spring of 2015. And whole story there. And you have to buy the book to read it all. I actually think that's the strongest chapter in the book. It's near the end. And I wrote it almost straight out, got it to where I wanted it. Then I sent it out to lots of people, almost 10. And most of them came back and said, you nailed it. They said, add a sentence here or there, but you got it. So I kind of left it after my first writing, frankly. And I think it's pretty powerful about it. So it was hard to stand up. But a lot of this goes back to my Marine Corps. What's the right thing to do? I wasn't, I was over 60 at that point in time. All my background, everything. I mean, we had gay people in the Marine Corps, even though it was illegal.
Sure.
Everybody knew it. Just accepted. It didn't bother anybody. I've lived around the world. No one else knows why this is an issue.
But you spent 12 years in Catholic school, then you went in the Marine Corps for 23. That doesn't exactly, most people wouldn't connect that with membership in Lambda.
No, but again, in the Marine Corps, like all the other services, no one cared too much. We knew what the rules were, and everybody knew what the rules were, and everybody just kind of moved on, and never seemed to be an issue. So there's a lot of that in my mind. As I say, in the last chapter about urban republicanism, I mean, when you think of individual liberty, what are we talking about here? Is it individual liberty for this group and not this group? Or is it individual liberty for everybody? So that's it. That's playing in my mind. And the Catholic thing really didn't come to mind, to be frank with you, at all. I'd gone to when it was still illegal in Indiana for gay marriage, there was an additional ceremony for one of the counselors. And I actually went to it. And every religion, everybody had a minister there of some kind, except Catholics. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, every other religion was saying, this is okay. So I got strong feelings about all that. I have really strong feelings about the founding of the country and how I think original notions of conservatism and natural rights and everything we've gone away from it. And so I think that was all playing into all of this as RFRA played out to me. It was just so hard to go through all of that because I say, frankly, in the book, I don't think most legislators knew what they were voting on. They did not realize what they had, because of the way the legislatures are done. They might know 2 or 3 subjects, but they have voted on 100 subjects. So they rely on somebody else to kind of tell them this is the right thing to do. Well, somebody told them this. Well, the people who told them that was not, they knew what the bill was about, but it was not what they thought. It was not what they were told.
It was so weird to be on the other side of you on that. Not philosophically, because I agreed with you, but I was the communications director for Mike Pence for Indiana. And Marty Obst, who I know you think the world of, and he loves you, he was executive director of that campaign. And we simply just couldn't believe it. And I remember, even though I never did anything wrong, I felt disloyal because I wasn't standing next to you as you were fighting it. You had Jen Pittman, who's phenomenal.
She is.
You had Jason Dudich, as we said before. But I felt like I can't believe that reporters are talking to him and they're coming to me to respond to Mayor Ballard. It was like the Twilight Zone.
It was difficult. I was actually, other than Christmas, I was actually on my only second vacation in 8 years outside of the state for a week or more. I was in Florida, and when Jen Pittman called me, now Jen Ensley, called me and saying, Gen Con's about to leave. I said, what? And it was because this was bubbling up, and I had to put out a press release that first Wednesday, had to put a press release that day. I'm in Florida, or else Gen Con is leaving. What? That's what I was told.
And I had to defend your press release in a meeting with the Pence people. That was joyous.
I imagine it was. But Pence didn't sign it until Friday, late afternoon. There's a whole thing. Again, I'm not going to go through the whole chapter, but it's blow by blow in the book. And I would suggest to you that it's a lot different than the chapter that the governor wrote in his book.
Did you ever have a one-on-one discussion with him?
We did not.
I didn't think so.
Did not.
And speaking of the smarts of Ryan Vaughn, he had a big role to play in how the quote-unquote fix him and a lot of other leaders.
Yeah, I was not invited to that press conference on the fix, as you can imagine. But they were blaming me for so much of this, and I wasn't really the one driving this. First of all, they're driving, and then the organizations were kind of pushing, including the old-time Republicans, including the business community, and of course, including the community that supported the LGBT community. I mean, there were lots of people pushing back behind closed doors at the State House. It wasn't.
And you felt a duty, like, I'm the chief executive of the city. What you're doing is going to irreparably harm this city, and that's what I got to worry about.
It was happening as it was going on. And as I detail, I think quite nicely. And in that press conference on that Monday, the next Monday, which was carried certainly live locally, but I think CNN picked it up nationally live. And the people standing behind me, holy cow, Sports Corp, Business Bureau, ACLU, Urban League.
No regrets. No hesitation. That was always the right thing to do in your mind. No.
Not even close. I got 2 phone calls before that, one from a senator and one from a House, both really well. And they urged me not to do that. And I said, I'll modify it, but I'm doing it. And if you saw my words, it's still on YouTube. If you saw what I said, you wouldn't think I modified it, but I did a little bit. But they wanted me to not do it. And it went off at 2, as I recall. They called me between 1 and 2. I mean, the die was already cast at that point in time. But they were so far off the mark from what the business community wanted, from the education community wanted, from what the sports community wanted, from what old-time Republicans who built up the city for the last 40 years wanted. It was completely off the mark. And they didn't seem to know it. They didn't really get it.
And understanding the power of social media at the time.
Yeah. They didn't really get it until like Tuesday night or Wednesday morning of that second week. Then that's when I think it finally kicked into them. That, oh my God, we really screwed this up. And my job, there was a group of business people that met at the chamber occasionally. I did not know that until afterwards, actually. But I was talking to Mark Miles throughout this, and he said, okay, we're going to do this. He didn't tell me about that little meeting, but we got things over here happening. We want you to do this. And I did that. And I was the national face. And so I had to do the national radio and the TV on it, along with the local stuff, face of it all, while they worked behind the scenes. And it worked out pretty well, actually. But like I said, I wasn't invited to the final press conference, even though I did watch it. And I was appalled at the tenor of some of those folks. But
appalled how? Why?
They were kind of joking. And some of the national press asked some questions. They were trying to kind of play it off. And I thought, do you guys not know what just happened? But anyway, they got through it. But the governor didn't sign it until almost 6:00 that night. I was at an event. And remember, this is the Final Four weekend. There's a whole part of the Final Four that played into all of this that you won't believe, including a potential concert that did not happen. That was massive name because of Salesforce. I'm at an event with Jim Nance. I'm in the audience, don't worry. And Jim Nance and the 4 coaches, right? So I'm in the front row of Jim Nance and the 4 Final Four coaches. Before we figured out, I was with Ryan Vaughn before we got word that the governor signed it. And then he got on a plane, slipped on a plane, and went to Europe for a week. But we were wondering, are you not going to sign this thing? Because it was several hours.
It was.
And we were all like, oh my God, what's happening here? But he did. And I'm sure he made a lot of phone calls because I'm sure he was worried about his political future, which I wasn't worried about my political future at all. I never really thought in those terms anyway. I always tried to do the right thing and let it all play out. But I did it differently. But it was, that was a tough time.
But you went to bed that night later than usual, I'm assuming, because you were out and about. You put your head on your pillow. And did you think for a second, you know what? Damn it. This fight is one of the, I didn't know it was coming, but I sure am damn glad it did.
Excuse me. Just like, I'm not sure I thought about it in those terms.
Because I bet your kids were pretty influential.
My kids were calling me. They're out on their jobs at that point in time. My son was still here. My daughter was up in Boston. And she called me and said, Dad, this is massive out here. And because I knew it was national. It was a national story. It wasn't a local story. It was a national story. And she goes, boy, everybody's calling me, Dad, and they're so proud of you. That's what she said. And and she did that from Boston. You know, I had all these other mayors calling me throughout the week. Says, Greg, I love you, man, but nobody from my city and my governors all said the same thing. We're not visiting Indiana. You can't come to Indiana anymore. But that was happening routinely. So
there was no exaggeration. The people who thought RFRA, the controversy was much ado about nothing. They didn't really worry about the social aspects of it, but the tourism and the dollars and the commerce, they really most of them tried to, downplay it, but they were wrong.
Anybody who says that doesn't know what they're talking about. It was completely the opposite. We were in real danger. And they played off because it didn't turn out great. But within a few years, it had come back. But I'll tell you straight out, lots of national conventions went away. They were filled in by more in-state conventions because they had to scramble to try to keep all those people. There's 60, 70,000 people in the hospitality industry. Got to keep them working if at all possible. It was terrible, Robert. It was terrible. And you can't believe what was happening in the moment, especially in that second week, what was happening. And for anybody to say that, that's just silly, absolutely silly. But it did play out. That phone call from my daughter was pretty special, actually. But it proved out we were on the right side of this thing. I don't remember going to bed that night. I do remember we had a Final Four, so I had games to go to on Saturday and Monday. But it was so hard. It was so hard because those are my friends, and most of them, believe it or not, I don't think they know what they voted for because the governor and others are saying, well, this is just like what Bill Clinton did in 1992 at the federal level, which was not true. And so it was bad. It was really bad.
Mayor Ballard wasn't the only person who was proud of you.
No, thanks. I appreciate that.
I've come up with a new 5 questions.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I am ready.
What was your first job? Because when you came on the podcast, my first question was, what was your first car? So I've never asked you what your first job is.
Take away the paper boy, not a real job. I was a busboy at the Big Will restaurant on Shadeland Avenue.
That is great. I kind of remember that, but yeah. Back on Shadeland Avenue used to be the avenue.
That was the bypass.
Yeah.
And I think 465 had just gone in, but State Road 100, Shadeland Avenue, was the bypass for the city. And so that restaurant was there. And of course, the restaurant's long gone. It used to turn into a karate place and then went away. But the thing I loved most about that job was not necessarily being the busboy, which was fine. It was a fine job. But I got to change the letters. You had a big old pole, a 20-foot pole to change the letters for the next day's menu. I loved doing that.
If you could witness any sporting event in history, be there in the crowd, which event would you choose?
Oh, you're not going to believe what I'm saying. You don't believe it. Billy Mills winning the 10,000 meter race at the 1964 Olympics in Tokyo.
I know that's a favorite story of yours.
The best for Americans, you got to understand we have a bias on this, but the best upset for everybody is the hockey team in 1980. And I understand that, but the best individual upset ever in the Olympics, I think, is Billy Mills winning the 10,000 meters. He was a the third guy on the American team, and absolutely nobody, borrowed shoes. I mean, just stunning story.
It's the funniest movie ever made.
Ghostbusters.
Ghostbusters?
I can't get enough of it. When it came out, it was so different than anything else at the time. Everybody else, I mean, I still think Hollywood kind of does the same thing over and over again a lot of times, but Ghostbusters was pretty damn unique when it came out, and I just can't get enough of He Slimed Me. I can't get enough of that. The other good movie, not a comedy that people should see that they don't know about, Something the Lord Made.
Okay.
Something the Lord Made. Unbelievable movie. Historically accurate, too.
What's your favorite Marine Corps movie?
I have to say Full Metal Jacket.
Ginger or Marianne?
Oh, Marianne, not close.
Wrong again. You get one mulligan from your time as mayor. Get one mulligan. Which one? What are you taking? It could be small, not big. You just completely redo X.
One event, or can it be over a period of time?
You could choose 8 years, but I don't think you'd want to. Anything you want. You're just like, man, I wish I'd done X different.
I wish I would have taken advantage of everything that IU had to offer.
In your life?
During my college days. I was, I'm a constant learner. I'm reading all the time. I'm writing all the time. All that is still, but the Marine Corps did that for me. To be frank with you, the Marine Corps did that for me. But I'm, when I look back, all I had to do was study and talk to these people, and I didn't know how to do it. I just didn't. I don't want to say I didn't do it or I left it off. I just didn't know how to do it. And that was stunningly wasted time.
But the waste of your time for those years led to the fulfillment of your life.
It did.
And others.
It did. It certainly did. No question about that. But I look back at that. I tried to, as best as I could, to make sure my kids they maximized their school time, college time. And I wish I had that time over to get smarter at that time. And it was all right there. It was all right there.
On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being most, 1 being least, how proud are you of your staff, of the people who worked for you?
Oh my God, that's way past 10. The whole book is dedicated to them. As you read the book, you will see how proud I am of them. And I was speaking about this again just last night, was that when Sherman comes up with this brilliant thing, or somebody, Adam Tease or whatever, they all try to say, well, the mayor, he really came up with this, a great idea, right? And I knew what they were doing because that's what they do politically, right? That's what people do. But I tried as best as possible to put it back on that. No, this was Adam's thing, or this was Sherman's thing, or whatever it was. And because I think what made us so successful was every idea did not have to come from me or from the 2 or 3 people up on that were talking to me constantly on the 25th floor. The idea can come from anywhere. We had to vet it. We had to make sure it worked. For instance, there's a guy named John Williams. He's now I think runs some department in a city in Texas. Great guy. Been in the city for 20 plus years in DPW. And he always had this idea about rerouting the garbage trucks throughout the week to save money. But he was too far down to get any traction for his ideas. Sherman heard it, brought it up to me. I said, well, hell, that makes a lot of sense. Can you run that and see if it works?
Mm-hmm.
It did. And we saved $1 million that first year. And it was just the guy. He eventually became the parks director, by the way. Even though he works in DBW, we made him the parks director for a couple of years. Great guy. But we didn't care where the idea came from. We didn't care if the idea came from a mayor's night out. We didn't care where it came from. And that's why I think we were broad in what we did. Deep also, I think, but we were really broad, whereas most people would say, it's got to be start up here at the top, and then we'll filter it on down, whatever these ideas are, and we'll run it politically and all this other stuff. We did it just the opposite. If somebody had a good idea, we'd see if it made any sense. And then if it made sense, we'd go ahead and do it. And then we'd figure out, how do we need to say this? And it was on the complete back end of it. How do we say this? That was the whole, as much as possible, that I think we did that better than anybody probably ever done that in the city and probably in the state too, frankly. It doesn't have to come from me. These weren't all my great ideas, not even close. But we allowed all the great ideas to come up and be vetted. And does this make sense for the city? I think that's why we had so many things going on at the same time, because we had coming from all different directions. And I hope that people pick that up from the book, frankly, because that's really what was happening. It wasn't all my great ideas. That was not even close to the truth. It was all these other people that were around me that had all these really good ideas that made a lot of sense and saved a lot of money that way. We made processes better. We did so many things like that because we listened well. We were really good at listening.
You have been listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, an Indiana-based public relations enterprise and federally certified veteran-owned small business. Thank you for the 3% goal on veteran business for city procurement.
First ones to do that.
Our guest today, Mayor Greg Ballard, who's going to love this next part of the ending of the show. As always, all our podcast interviews are dedicated to the legacy and generosity of P.E. McAllister.
Oh, wow. Great man. Great man.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Mayor, I often say there's 3 people who changed my professional life. It's P.E. McAllister, Jennifer Hollowell, and Greg Ballard. I wouldn't be able to do any of the things that I'm doing now without you, including this podcast, including being able to take care of my family the way that I can. You have no idea how much I love you, and I'm just so grateful for your presence in my life. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. That's very, very meaningful. And I'm happy that all worked out for both of us, frankly, because in late 2007, we didn't know what was going to happen to all of us. But I think it turned out so well. I appreciate so much your really kind words and still helping me today.
Always.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening to Leaders and Legends, brought to you by Veteran Strategies Incorporated. If you want to contact us about this program or our menu of public relations services, please send us an email at robert@veteranstrategies.com. That's robert@veteranstrategies.com.